Yo, welcome back to Potter Nexus. Before we jump in, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this one goes hard. What if Harry Potter wasn't just a survivor? What if at 2 years old, he straight up locked Voldemort's soul inside his own mind? No screams, no possession, just a Dark Lord trapped in a mental cage. Yeah, let's talk about that. Chapter 1. The Cage of the Infant King. The rain in Godric's Hollow didn't fall, it mourned. It was that heavy, suffocating British drizzle that felt like the sky was trying to drown the earth in slow motion. Inside the cottage, the air smelled of burnt cinnamon and ozone, the lingering scent of a protection spell that had just been shredded like wet tissue paper. James Potter lay at the base of the stairs, eyes wide and fixed on a ceiling he'd never see again. He looked less like a hero and more like a broken marionette whose strings had been cut by a god with a grudge. Upstairs, the nursery door didn't just open, it disintegrated. The wood groaned, splintering into toothpicks under the weight of a presence that made the very shadows in the room recoil. Lord Voldemort didn't walk, he glided, a pale, serpentine wraith wrapped in robes that looked like they were woven from the smoke of 1,000 funeral pyres. He didn't look at Lily Potter, who stood before the crib with her arms spread wide. To him, she was an ant, a high-pitched, vibrating nuisance blocking his view of the only thing in this world that made his blood run cold. Not Harry, please no, take me, kill me instead. Lily's voice was a jagged blade of desperation. She wasn't just begging, she was pouring every ounce of her soul into the floorboards, trying to anchor a love so ancient it predated the stars. Stand aside, you silly girl, Voldemort hissed. His voice was a rasp, the sound of a dead man's skin dragging over dry gravel. Stand aside now, and you may live to weep another day. Not Harry, please, have mercy, have mercy. Mercy is a luxury for the weak, Voldemort whispered, almost tenderly. He raised the yew wand. It looked like a bleached bone in the moonlight. Avada Kedavra. The green light didn't just flash, it screamed. It was the color of a dying star, a sickly, neon emerald that erased the shadows and turned Lily Potter into a silhouette of pure grief before she hit the floor. Shish. He was gone before her heart finished its last beat. And then, there was the boy. Harry Potter didn't cry. He sat in the crib, clutching a stuffed stag with sticky, small hands, staring up at the monster with eyes that were too green, too deep, and far too still for a 15-month-old. Voldemort looked down at the child. He felt a flicker of something, not pity, never pity, but a strange, clinical curiosity. This was the one, this tiny, fleshy thing was the equal the prophecy spoke of. It was an insult, it was a joke played by fate, and Voldemort was the punchline. You are the end of my worries, Voldemort said, his red eyes narrowing. You are the pebble in my boot. Today, I crush you. He didn't hesitate. He leveled the wand directly at the infant's forehead, right between those unnervingly calm eyes. The air in the room began to vibrate. The light bulbs, if there were any, would have shattered. The very fabric of reality seemed to thin, caught in the gravity of the Dark Lord's malice. Avada Kedavra. The curse roared out of the wand, a jet of terminal green energy that moved with the inevitability of a tidal wave. It struck the boy's forehead with the force of a falling mountain. But then, the world broke. In that split second, something happened inside Harry Potter's mind that defied every law of magic known to the Ministry, the Unspeakables, or Albus Dumbledore himself. Most minds are like open meadows, easily trampled by Legilimency. Some are like fortified castles, protected by the discipline of Occlumency. Harry's mind was a singularity. He didn't just have shields. He had an instinct, a primal, cosmic reflex. As the killing curse hit his skin, his consciousness didn't shatter, it contracted. It became a black hole. It reached out with a billion invisible, psychic fingers and grabbed the green light. It grabbed the spell, and more importantly, it grabbed the piece of Voldemort that was currently being ripped away from the Dark Lord's main soul by the rebounding force of the ancient protection Lily had died to create. Voldemort's physical body didn't just die, it was vaporized. The explosion leveled the nursery, blowing the roof into the night sky. The Dark Lord's spirit, that mangled, pathetic remnant of a man, tried to flee into the forests of Albania. But a piece of him stayed behind. A jagged, screaming fragment of Tom Riddle was pulled into the darkness of Harry's mind. Welcome home, the silence whispered. Inside the mental landscape of Harry Potter, there was no nursery. There was only the void. And in the center of that void, a structure was being built at the speed of thought. It wasn't a castle, It was a panopticon, a prison made of cold, pressurized obsidian. Tom Riddle's soul fragment slammed into the floor of a cell that didn't have bars, it had mirrors. He looked up, his face a distorted mask of agony and confusion. "Where am I?" the fragment shrieked, its voice echoing off the walls of Harry's subconscious. "Release me, I am Lord Voldemort, I am the conqueror of death." From the darkness above the cell, a voice answered. It wasn't a child's voice. It was the collective roar of 1,000 ancestors, filtered through the mouth of a toddler. "Stay." The obsidian walls glowed with a faint, pulsing green light, the energy of the killing curse, trapped and repurposed as a battery for the cage. Harry Potter wasn't just a survivor. He was a jailer. The piece of Voldemort threw itself against the walls, casting every dark curse it could remember. Cruciatus, Fiendfire, killing curses, they hit the obsidian and were simply absorbed. The more Riddle fought, the more the prison grew. It fed on his rage. It feasted on his fear. Outside, in the ruins of the house, baby Harry let out a single, sharp breath. The lightning bolt scar on his head didn't bleed, it glowed with a dull, suppressed light, like a coal under ash. He looked at the empty space where the monster had been, then looked down at his mother's body. A single tear tracked through the dust on his cheek. Deep within his mind, the prison doors slammed shut. 1,000 locks turned simultaneously. Clack, clack, clack. Voldemort was screaming, but no one could hear him. He was buried under layers of subconscious steel, tucked away in a corner of a brain that was rapidly rebuilding its own architecture to ensure the prisoner never saw the sun again. By the time Rubeus Hagrid's motorcycle touched down in the street, the boy was asleep. He looked peaceful. He looked innocent. But behind those closed eyelids, in a fortress of infinite depth, a toddler was staring down a god, and the god was the one trembling. The boy who lived was a lie. He was the boy who kept the key. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Basement of the Soul. 10 years is a long time to spend in a dark room with a ghost. For Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs wasn't just a bedroom, it was a laboratory of the mind. While the Dursleys slept, their snow res vibrating through the floorboards like the grunts of oblivious swine, Harry sat in the pitch black, cross-legged on his thin mattress. He wasn't sleeping, he was patrolling. In the outside world, the world of beige curtains and manicured lawns in Little Whinging, Harry was a freak. He was the skinny kid with the broken glasses and the baggy clothes who looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward. But inside his own head, Harry was a titan. He was the architect of a sprawling, impossible metropolis of thought. He closed his eyes and sank. It was a physical sensation, like falling through cold water. The walls of the cupboard vanished, replaced by the obsidian corridors of his inner sanctum. This was his Palace of the Void. It was a cold, brutalist structure that stretched into an infinite gray sky. There were no windows, only miles of filing cabinets containing every memory he'd ever had, the smell of his mother's hair, the flash of green light, the precise way Dudley's face reddened when he was about to throw a tantrum. And at the very bottom, beneath the layers of memory and logic, was the cell. Harry stood before the massive, seamless door of the vault. He didn't need a key, he was the key. With a thought, the obsidian turned translucent. Inside, Tom Riddle was no longer a man. He was a smudge of gray smoke, a tattered remnant of a soul that had spent a decade screaming into the vacuum. He had tried everything. He had tried to bribe the boy with promises of power. He had tried to terrify him with visions of gore. He had tried to seep into Harry's nervous system like a poison. But the prison held. It always held. "You're quiet tonight," Harry's mental projection said. His voice in this realm was deep, resonant, and stripped of the stuttering uncertainty he used to survive the Dursleys. The smoke coalesced into a pale, hairless face with slit-like nostrils. Tom Riddle's eyes, once a terrifying crimson, were now the color of rusted blood. He rest his translucent hands against the barrier. "Let me out," Riddle hissed. The words were thin, like the sound of a dying breeze. "I can make you a king, boy. I can show you things that would make Dumbledore weep with envy. You are living in a cupboard. I can give you the world." Harry watched him with the detached curiosity of a scientist looking at a moth under glass. "The world is noisy, Tom. And I don't like kings. I like order. You are a monster," Riddle shrieked, his form flickering. "To do this to a part of yourself, to wall off your own magic, you are more of a dark lord than I ever was." "I'm not walling off my magic," Harry replied calmly. "I'm using it. You are the battery, Tom. Every time you scream, you power the lights in here. Every time you try to break out, you strengthen the walls. You're very useful. It was the truth. Harry had discovered at age 6 that he didn't do accidental magic, like other children. He didn't blow up light bulbs or make glass disappear. Instead, when he was angry or scared, the prison just got colder. The energy of his magic was constantly being funneled inward, tightening the screws on the prisoner. The result was that Harry appeared perfectly, eerily normal to the outside world, except for the eyes. Those green eyes that seemed to look through people, calculating their heartbeats and scanning for weaknesses. Boy, get up, cook the bacon, and don't you dare burn it. Petunia's voice pierced the mental veil like a rusty needle. Harry blinked, and suddenly he was back in the cupboard, the smell of dust and spit, or webs replacing the sterile scent of obsidian. He climbed out, his movements fluid and silent. He moved like a shadow that had learned how to wear clothes. As he stood in the kitchen, flipping bacon with a practiced hand, he watched Vernon Dursley read the newspaper. He could see the pulse in Vernon's neck. He knew exactly where to strike if he wanted to stop that pulse. He knew the structural integrity of the human windpipe. Tom had taught him that. Tom had taught him a lot of things during their long midnight chats. Boy, Vernon barked, not looking up. The mail. Go. Harry walked to the front door. 3 letters, a bill, a postcard from Marge, and the third envelope was heavy, made of yellowish parchment. The ink was an emerald green. There was no stamp. Mr. H. Potter. The cupboard under the stairs. 4. Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry felt a tremor in his mind. In the basement of his soul, Riddle began to laugh. It was a jagged, horrible sound. They're coming for you, Harry, the prisoner whispered. The old man and his puppets. They want their hero back. They have no idea they're inviting a prison warden into their school. Harry ignored the voice. He looked at the wax seal, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter, H. He didn't open it. He didn't show excitement. He tucked the letter into his oversized waistband and brought the other 2 to Vernon. Where's the other one? Vernon asked, his eyes narrowing. I heard the mail slot click 3 times. Harry looked him dead in the eye. He projected a sliver of the coldness from the vault, just a tiny, microscopic fraction of the void. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop 5 degrees. Vernon flinched, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. He didn't know why, but looking at his nephew felt like staring into the mouth of a loaded cannon. Just a coupon for pizza, Uncle Vernon, Harry said, his voice a flat, perfect monotone. I threw it away. It was expired. Vernon opened his mouth to shout, to assert his dominance, to call him a liar. But the words died in his throat. He looked at Harry's scar, that jagged lightning bolt that seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light, and he felt a primal urge to run. Right, Vernon grunted, looking back at his paper. Get back to the stove. Harry returned to the bacon. He felt the weight of the parchment against his skin. Hogwarts. Magic. A world full of people like him. Or rather, people who thought they were like him. He went back into his mind for a split second. He stood before Riddle's cell. Is there a library at this school, Tom? Riddle snarled. The greatest in the world. Good, Harry said. I need better designs for the higher levels. If I'm going to be surrounded by wizards, I need to make sure my gates are reinforced. You can't keep this up forever, Harry. Riddle yelled as Harry began to withdraw. Eventually, you'll sleep. Eventually, you'll slip. And when you do, I will burn your mind to cinders and wear your skin like a suit. Harry paused at the edge of the void. He looked back at the screaming fragment of the man who had murdered his parents. Tom, Harry said softly, I'm 11 years old, and I've already forgotten what it's like to be afraid of you. Imagine what I'll be like at 17. He snapped his fingers, and the vault went pitch black, silencing the screams. That night, while the Dursleys slept, Harry finally opened the letter. He read it once, twice, and then memorized it. He didn't need to write a reply. He knew they were watching. He knew the freakishness was about to escalate. He lay back, staring at the underside of the stairs. He began to visualize the Hogwarts Express. He didn't see a train, he saw a transport vessel. He didn't see a school. He saw an expansion of his territory. He was Harry Potter. He was the boy who lived. And he was bringing the Dark Lord with him, chained in a dungeon of his own making. The wizarding world wasn't ready. They expected a savior. They expected a shy, brave boy with a heart of gold. They were getting a jailer with a heart of obsidian. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Ledger of Souls. The storm outside the shack on the rock was a tantrum of nature, but inside Harry's mind, it was a whisper. When the door was kicked off its hinges, hitting the floor with a boom that shook the foundations of the island. Harry didn't jump, he didn't scream, he stood in the shadows of the corner, watching the giant man fill the doorway. Rubeus Hagrid was a mountain of hair and moleskin, smelling of wet dog and fermented hops. In the basement of Harry's soul, Riddle's fragment stirred, hissing in recognition. The oaf, Tom spat. Dumbledore's loyal beast. Kill him now, Harry. He is a vulnerability. Quiet, Tom, Harry thought. And the obsidian walls of the vault tightened. Hagrid was busy bending Vernon's rifle into a pretzel, a feat of strength that made Dudley let out a squeak like a stepped-on chew toy. But when Hagrid turned to Harry, his wild eyes softened into something Harry found profoundly irritating: pity. Harry, Hagrid breathed, his voice like a landslide. Last time I saw you, you was only a baby. You look a lot like your dad, but you got your mum's eyes. I know, Harry finished for him. His voice was a flatline. It lacked the wonder Hagrid was clearly expecting. You're late. The letters have been arriving for weeks. I assume you're the extraction team. Hagrid blinked, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. Extraction? No, I'm the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. I've come to take ye to get your school things. The keys, Harry repeated. He liked that word. Keys meant access. Keys meant control. Then let's go. This island is structurally unsound and the company is tedious. The trip to Diagon Alley was a blur of sensory data that Harry processed with clinical efficiency. The leaky cauldron was a pit of desperation and hero worship. When the bartender, Tom, reached out to touch Harry's hand, Harry pulled back with a speed that bordered on the supernatural. Don't, Harry said. It wasn't a request. It was a command that vibrated with a sliver of the cold from the vault. The pub went silent. The air grew heavy, the way it does right before a lightning strike. Hagrid cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. He's just excited, Harry. You're a hero, see. The boy who lived. I survived an explosion, Harry said, moving toward the brick wall in the back. The physics are unremarkable. Show me the market. When he wall peeled back to reveal Diagon Alley, Harry finally paused. It wasn't awe, it was an assessment. He saw 1,000 shops filled with weapons, ingredients, and knowledge. He saw a society that was loud, bright, and dangerously disorganized. Look at them, Riddle's voice echoed, dripping with venom. Sheep playing at being wolves. They have forgotten what true power feels like. We could burn this alley to ash in an hour, Harry. Just let me show you how to channel the fire. You're a prisoner, Tom, Harry reminded him internally. Prisoners don't give tours. They went to Gringotts first. Harry liked the goblins. They were cold, they were efficient, and they understood the value of a strong vault. As he stood in the depths of his family's treasury, surrounded by mounds of gold, he didn't feel rich. He felt equipped. He took what he needed and ignored the rest. But it was in Ollivanders that the real tension began. The shop was a graveyard of trees, thousands of boxes containing the hearts of magical creatures. Mr. Ollivander moved like a spindly insect, his pale eyes reflecting a light that shouldn't have been there. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter, the old man whispered. He reached out to touch Harry's scar, but Harry caught his wrist midair. The grip was too strong for an 11-year-old. Ollivander's eyes widened. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter, Ollivander said, his voice trembling slightly, but I suspect you have already chosen your path. Harry let go. The wand is a tool. I need a tool that won't break when I push it. He tried a dozen wands. Each one felt like a toy. Too light, too flimsy. They couldn't handle the cold. Every time he flicked one, it either sputtered or felt like it was trying to escape his hand. Then, Ollivander reached for a box at the very back of the shelf. He looked at it with a mixture of dread and fascination. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches. Nice and supple. Harry took the wand. The reaction was instantaneous. A spark of red light flew from the tip, but it wasn't a spark of warmth. It was a spark of recognition. In Harry's mind, the vault groaned. Tom Riddle's fragment began to scream. A high-pitched sound of pure agony and rage. No, Riddle shrieked. Not that one. That is the brother. Harry gripped the holly wand tighter. He felt the connection, a bridge of fire and blood, that stretched between his mind and the wood. He could feel the pulse of the phoenix feather, and he could feel it resonating with the prisoner in his head. Curious, Ollivander whispered, leaning in so close Harry could smell the cedar dust on his breath. So very curious. What's curious? Harry asked, though he already knew. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. And it so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand, gave another feather. Just one other. Harry stared at the old man, his green eyes unblinking. The brother of this wand, Ollivander continued, gave you that scar. He did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. I don't believe in great and terrible, Harry said, pocketing the wand. I believe in contained and loose. How much? As they left the shop, Hagrid was waiting with a cage. Inside was a snowy owl, her eyes amber and intelligent. Happy birthday, Harry, Hagrid said, looking relieved to be out of the creepy shop. Harry looked at the owl. She looked back at him, and for the first time in his life, Harry felt a connection to a living thing that didn't involve a cage. She was a hunter. She was silent. She was beautiful in her lethality. Hedwig, Harry said. That night, in a room at the Leaky Cauldron, Harry sat on the bed with Hedwig perched on the headboard. The holly wand lay on the nightstand, glowing with a faint, residual heat. Harry went deep. He went past the library, past the memories, down into the blackest pit of the vault. Riddle was curled in a fetal position, his smoke-like form vibrating. The wand recognized you, Tom, Harry said. Riddle looked up, his face twisted in a snarl. It is a trap, Dumbledore's design. He wants us linked. He wants to use that connection to look inside. Let him look, Harry said, stepping closer to the barrier. He'll find exactly what I want him to find. He'll find a hero. He'll find a boy who survived. He won't find the basement. You think you can hide from him? Riddle laughed, a dry, hacking sound. Albus Dumbledore is the greatest Legilimens of the age. He will peel your mind like an orange. Then I'll make sure the orange is bitter, Harry replied. Sleep, Tom. We have a train to catch in the morning. And I want you at full strength. I'm going to need your memories of the castle. Every secret passage, every hidden room, every ward. And what do I get in return? Harry looked at the prisoner. You get to stay in one piece. For now. Harry withdrew from the void and opened his eyes. He picked up the holly wand. It felt balanced. It felt right. He wasn't just going to a school. He was going to a fortress. And he was going to make it his own. The boy who lived was gone. The boy who locked the door was moving into the great hall. And he was bringing the devil in his pocket. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Iron Path to the Ivory Tower. King's Cross Station was a chaotic symphony of the mundane. Steam hissed from iron lungs. Whistles shrieked like banshees, and the air was thick with the smell of cheap diesel and expensive perfumes. To most, it was a transit hub. To Harry, it was a tactical bottleneck. He moved through the crowd with a predator's grace, his trunk floating behind him, not because of a spell, but because he was mentally tethered to it, his subconscious mind exerting a fraction of the old, to keep the physical world at a respectful distance. He didn't look for a platform, he looked for the anomaly. The barrier between platforms 9 and 10 didn't hum, it sang. It was a low NCY vibration that only someone with a mind as tuned as a piano wire could detect. The Weasleys, Tom's voice sneered from the vault. Look at them, a cluster of red-headed poverty. Blood traders, every one. Their father works for the ministry, tinkering with muggle toys while his children wear hand-me-down souls. They're loud, Harry thought, watching the youngest boy, a gangly kid with dirt on his nose, fumble with his trolley. Loud people are easy to read. They broadcast their intentions like radio towers. Harry didn't wait for an invitation. He walked straight at the solid brick pillar. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He simply stepped through the skin of reality. The Hogwarts Express was a scarlet beast, a relic of steam and brass that looked like it had been stolen from a dream. Harry ignored the fanfare. He bypassed the weeping mothers and the boasting fathers, heading straight for the very last carriage. He wanted the rear. He wanted to see who was coming for him. He found an empty compartment and slid the door shut. He didn't sit. He stood by the window, watching the platform dissolve into a blur of motion as the train lurched forward. The door slid open 10 minutes into the journey. Everywhere else is full. Mind if I sit? It was the red-headed boy from the platform. Ron. He looked nervous, his eyes darting to Harry's forehead before he could even finish his sentence. Sit, Harry said. It wasn't a welcome, it was a permission. Ron sat, trying to make conversation. He talked about Quidditch, about his brothers, about his rat, Scabbers. Harry listened with a terrifying stillness. He wasn't hearing the words, he was mapping Ron's nervous system. He saw the insecurity, the shadow of his older brother's achievements, the hunger for something, anything, that belonged only to him. "Kill the rat," Riddle whispered. The prisoner was pacing his cell now, his smoke-like form crackling with a strange electricity. "The rat smells of old magic, Harry. Stale, rot-filled magic. It isn't a rat, it's a coward in a fur coat." Harry looked at Scabbers, who was sleeping in Ron's lap. The cold in Harry's mind surged. He saw the rat's heartbeat. It was too slow, too deliberate. "Your pet is sick," Harry said. "What? No, Scabbers is just old," Ron said, clutching the rat defensively. "He's a parasite," Harry corrected. "He's been eating your family's magic for years. You should be careful who you let sleep in your bed." Before Ron could respond, the door slid open again. This time, it wasn't a boy. It was a girl with bushy brown hair and eyes. T looked like they hadn't slept since the late 80s. "Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one," she said, her voice high and bossy. Then she saw Harry. Her eyes locked onto his scar, and she gasped. "Holy cricket, you're Harry Potter. I've read all about you. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts." "I'm not a book, Miss Granger," Harry said. He temperature in the compartment dropped. Hermione flinched, her bossy exterior cracking for a split second. "And if you've read those books, you know that the accounts are largely speculative. No one was in that room but me. And I wasn't taking notes." Hermione stared at him, her mouth slightly open. She was used to being the smartest person in the room. She was used to having the answers. But Harry Potter felt like an exam she hadn't studied for. I just meant that it's an honor," she stammered. "Honor is a social construct used to motivate people to die for causes they don't understand," Harry said. Turning back to the window. "You're looking for a toad. Check the luggage racks in carriage 3. The vibration of the wheels is causing a resonance in the amphibian's inner ear. He'll be seeking high ground." Hermione blinked, stunned. "How did you go?" Harry said. "She fled. She's a mudblood, but she has a mind like a steel trap," Riddle observed. "If you don't break her, she'll be a problem. Or a tool. Everyone is a tool, Tom. Even you." The afternoon wore on. The trolley which came and went. Harry bought nothing. He didn't need sugar, he needed focus. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The light in the corridor seemed to dim. The door slid open a third time. Draco Malfoy stood there, flanked by two boys who looked like they had been carved out of boulders. Malfoy didn't look like a student. He looked like a prince who had just discovered a stain on his carpet. "So it's true," Malfoy said, his voice a drawl that dripped with practiced arrogance. "Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts." Harry didn't turn around. "You're Lucius Malfoy's son. I can smell the entitlement from here. It smells like overpriced cologne and daddy issues." Malfoy's face went pale, then a furious red. "You'd do well to show some respect, Potter. Some wizarding families are better than others. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort." He glanced at Ron with pure disgust. Harry finally turned. He didn't look at Malfoy's face, he looked at his soul. He saw the terror behind the sneer. Draco was a boy playing a part he didn't yet understand, trapped in a legacy that was already crushing his ribs. Harry walked toward him. Crabbe and Goyle stepped forward, but Harry didn't stop. He walked right into their personal space, his presence so heavy it felt like a physical weight on their chests. "You think you know about the wrong sort," Harry whispered. He leaned in, his green eyes burning with a light that wasn't holy. "I have the man who murdered my parents locked in a cage inside my skull. I watch him scream every night. Compared to what I've seen, you're just a loud noise in a silk suit." Malfoy backed away, his hand trembling as it reached for his wand. "Don't," Harry warned. "If you pull that wood, I'll make you forget how to breathe. Now, leave. My compartment isn't a museum." Malfoy scrambled backward, his bodyguards stumbling after him. The door slammed shut. Ron was staring at Harry as if he were a ghost. That was Malfoy. "His dad is irrelevant," Harry said. The train began to slow down. They were approaching Hogsmeade. Outside, the mountains rose up like the teeth of the earth, black and jagged against a twilight sky. Harry went into the vault. He stood before Riddle. "We're here, Tom. The castle. Your old playground." Riddle was standing at the bars of his cell, his eyes fixed on the horizon Harry was projecting. "It's changed. I can feel it. The wards are older. Dumbledore has been busy." "Let him be busy," Harry said. "He's guarding the front door." He has no idea I'm already inside the house. Harry stepped off the train and onto the dark, shivering platform. Hagrid's voice boomed over the heads of the students, calling the first years to the boats. As Harry sat in the small boat, gliding across the black, glassy surface of the Great Lake, the castle finally came into view. Hogwarts was a titan of stone and magic, its windows glowing like the eyes of a beast. It was beautiful, it was ancient, and to Harry, it looked like a much larger version of the cupboard under the stairs. A place where things were kept. He felt the soul fragment in his head pulse with a sickening, joyous recognition. Home, they both thought. But as Harry Potter stepped onto the stone docks, he wasn't thinking about lessons or friends. He was thinking about the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor. He could feel it, a thrumming, golden heat that didn't belong in this cold castle. The Philosopher's Stone, life eternal, Riddle whispered, his voice hungry. No, Harry thought, his face a mask of cold stone as he followed the professor up the stairs. Not life, power, a power that can build a bigger cage. The doors to the great hall swung open. The ceiling was a map of the stars, but Harry's eyes were on the old man in the center of the high table. Albus Dumbledore. The headmaster looked down through his half-moon spectacles, his eyes twinkling with a warmth that Harry knew was a lie. Dumbledore leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Harry's. In that moment, Harry didn't hide. He didn't pull back. He opened the first gate of his mind. He let Dumbledore see a boy who was lonely. A boy who was curious. A boy who was Harry. But deep, deep down, behind the libraries and the false memories. Harry Potter sat in the dark of the vault, his hand on the throat of a Dark Lord, waiting for the old man to blink. The Sorting Hat was placed on the stool. It began to sing. Harry didn't listen to the lyrics. He was listening to the magic of the hat, a sentient piece of fabric that could read the very fabric of a soul. Potter, Harry, Professor McGonagall called out. The hall went silent. Harry walked forward. He sat on the stool. The hat was dropped over his eyes. Oh, a voice whispered in his ear. It was a dry, ancient voice. Oh, my, what have we here? A cage, and a king. A warden, and a god. I haven't seen a mind like this since, well, since the one you're keeping downstairs. Sort me, Harry thought, and stay out of the basement if you want to keep your stitching. The hat chuckled. Threatening a hat, how very, Slytherin, but the courage to hold that monster, that's Gryffindor. The intellect to build that prison, Ravenclaw, and the loyalty to the gate, Hufflepuff wouldn't have you. I don't care where I go, Harry thought. I just want the room with the best locks. Then it better be Slytherin. The hat roared. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the tables. The boy who lived, the savior of the light, had just been sent to the House of the Snakes. Harry stood up, handed the hat back to a stunned McGonagall, and walked toward the green and silver table. He didn't look at the students. He didn't look at Malfoy. He looked at Dumbledore. The twinkle in the headmaster's eyes was gone. Harry sat down. He felt the cold stone of the bench. He felt the weight of the wand in his pocket. The game was no longer about survival. It was about territory. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Serpent's Throat. The Slytherin Common Room was an underwater tomb. Situated beneath the Great Lake, the light that filtered through the reinforced windows was a ghostly, undulating green, casting long, shivering shadows across the dark velvet tapestries. The air tasted of salt and ancient damp. It was quiet, not the peaceful quiet of a library, but the predatory silence of a snake pit waiting for a mouse to twitch. Harry stood in the center of the rug, his trunk at his side. Around him, the pure blood elite of Britain's magical hierarchy watched him with a mixture of awe and naked aggression. He was the anomaly. He was the savior who had somehow ended up in the den of the damned. You don't belong here, Potter. Draco Malfoy was flanked by his goons again, standing near the hearth where a green fire crackled with unnatural heat. Malfoy had recovered his bravado now that he was on home turf. This isn't a place for half-bloods and heroes. This is a place for legacy. My father says your placement was a mistake, a glitch in the hat's senile mind. Harry didn't look at Malfoy. He was staring at the windows, watching a giant squid's tentacle drift lazily past the glass. The hat doesn't make mistakes, Draco. It makes decisions, and it decided that I'm exactly where I need to be. And where is that? A voice drawled from the shadows of the doorway. Severus Snape moved like a spill of black ink across the floor. He didn't walk, he glided, his robes billowing behind him like the wings of a giant bat. He stopped 3 feet from Harry, his hooked nose and sallow skin illuminated by the eerie firelight. His eyes were tunnels of blackness, cold and clinical. "The boy who lived," Snape whispered, the words sounding like a curse. "Our new celebrity." Harry met his gaze. Most students looked away from Snape. The man's presence was a psychological bludgeon. But Harry didn't flinch. He did something far more dangerous. He looked back with the same empty, analytical stare. In an instant, Harry felt a sharp, invasive pressure against his mind. It wasn't a physical pain, but a psychic intrusion, a needle trying to find a gap in the armor. Snape was using Legilimency. He was trying to bypass the pleasantries and see the truth. "He's in," Riddle shrieked in the vault, his smoke form thrashing against the obsidian walls. "He's a master, Harry. Close the gates. If he sees me, we are both dead." "Shut up, Tom," Harry thought, his focus narrowing to a single point. Harry didn't close the gates. If he slammed his mind shut, Snape would know he was hiding something monumental. Instead, Harry redirected. He opened a false corridor, a mental decoy he had spent years perfecting in the cupboard. He let Snape see a flick book of carefully curated memories: Dudley's fist, the smell of burnt bacon, the coldness of the cupboard, the loneliness of a boy with no friends. He painted a picture of a broken, resentful orphan. Snape's eyes narrowed. The pressure increased. He was looking for the spark, the arrogance he expected from James Potter's son. But he found only a hollowed-out shell. Then, Harry did something Snape didn't expect. He pushed back, not with a shield, but with a question. He projected a single "I am" age into the space between them, a flash of green light and the sound of a woman's scream. Snape flinched. The mental connection snapped like a strained cable. The professor took a half-step back, his breath hitching for a microsecond before his mask of indifference slammed back into place. 10 points from Slytherin, Snape hissed, his voice trembling with a suppressed emotion Harry couldn't quite identify. 4. Insolence. "I didn't speak, Professor," Harry said softly. "Your existence is insolent enough," Snape snapped. He turned to the rest of the room. "Potter is a student like any other. If I catch any of you coddling him, or attacking him, I will personally see to it that your stay in this house is as miserable as the muggles you so despise. To your dorms, now." As the students scurried away, Harry lingered. He watched Snape's retreating back. "He loved her," Riddle's voice whispered, now calm and dripping with malice. "The potion's master. He loved your mother, Harry. I can smell the grief on him. It's old, like rotted silk, a useful lever, don't you think?" "Love is a weakness," Harry replied internally. "But leverage is universal." The Slytherin dorms were cold. Harry took the bed furthest from the door, the one in the corner where he could see everything. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his wand in his hand, and sank into the vault. The basement was vibrating. The ambient magic of Hogwarts was flooding the prison, and Riddle was feasting on it. The fragment was larger now, more solid. He had taken the form of a handsome, 16-year-old boy with dark hair and pale skin. Tom Riddle in his prime. "The castle likes me, Harry," Tom said, leaning against the obsidian bars. "I am its true heir. Every stone in this place remembers my name. You can't keep me in here while I'm surrounded by my own power." "The castle doesn't have a choice," Harry said, stepping into the cell. "And neither do you." Harry grabbed the spectral Tom by the throat. In the physical world, Harry's body didn't move, but in the vault, the air shattered. Harry slammed Tom against the wall. "You think this is your house?" Harry growled. "You died in this house. You failed in this house. You're nothing but a ghost in a jar, and I'm the one holding the lid." He channeled the cold, the pure, unadulterated essence of his Occlumency. The obsidian walls began to shrink, pressing inward. Tom's eyes widened with genuine terror. He tried to summon the magic of the castle, but Harry was faster. He stripped the energy away, absorbing it into the prison's foundation. "I need to know about the third floor," Harry commanded. "Dumbledore is hiding something, a golden heat." "What is it?" Tom gasped for air, his form flickering. The stone. Flamel's toy. The Philosopher's Stone. He brought it here because he knows I'm coming. He's using the school as a bait shop. A stone that grants immortality, Harry mused, loosening his grip. Dumbledore wouldn't just leave it there. It's a test, a trap, it's a masterpiece of security, Tom spat, rubbing his neck. But no lock is perfect. Not even yours, Harry. Harry left the vault and opened his eyes in the dark dormitory. He could hear the muffled breathing of his housemates. He looked at his hands. They were steady. He stood up and walked to the window. Far above, through the murky water of the lake, he could see the moon. He wasn't interested in the stone for immortality. He was interested in the stone because it was a catalyst. If he could feed the stone to the vault, he wouldn't just be a jailer. He would be an eternal one. He could keep Riddle, and anyone else who crossed him, locked away for 1,000 years. The next morning, the celebrity status reached a fever pitch. In the Great Hall, owls flooded in. But none were for Harry. He sat alone at the end of the table, eating dry toast and reading a history of magic. Professor Quirrell, the stuttering wreck who taught defense against the dark arts, walked past. As he did, Harry's scar didn't just hurt, it screamed. It felt like a white-hot poker was being driven into his brain. In the vault, Riddle went berserk. He began to howl, a sound of such pure, agonizing longing that Harry nearly fell off his bench. Him, Riddle screamed. He is there. The master. The main soul. I can feel him. Harry clutched the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. He looked at the back of Quirrell's head, specifically the thick, purple turban the man wore. The cold surged, but it wasn't enough to drown out the resonance. As like two tuning forks being struck at the same time. The fragment in Harry's head was trying to tear itself out of his skull to join the entity hidden under the cloth. Quirrell paused, turning slightly. His watery eyes met Harry's. For a second, the stuttering facade vanished. A cold, ancient intelligence stared out from the man's face. Mr. P. Potter, Quirrell chirped. APP pleasure. Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy holding the gates of his mind against a hurricane. As Quirrell walked away, the pain receded to a dull throb. Harry sat back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Tom, Harry whispered in the darkness of his mind. What was that? It's him, Tom whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of worship and horror. He's a parasite. He's hitching a ride on that pathetic man. My master, my future, he's here to take the stone. Harry wiped a bead of blood from his scar. The board was set. Dumbledore had the trap, Quirrell had the hunter, and Harry had the key. He won't take anything, Harry thought, his eyes tracking Quirrell as the man sat at the high table. Because I'm going to get there first. And when I do, I'm going to lock both of you in the basement. Harry Potter stood up, his breakfast unfinished. He had a class with the Gryffindors next. Potions. With Snape. It was time to see if he could turn the professor's grief into a weapon. Because if he was going to take down a Dark Lord and a headmaster, he was going to need a soldier who had nothing left to lose. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Alchemist's Grief. The Podio NS dungeon was a masterclass in atmospheric oppression. Glass jars containing the pickled remains of things that should never have been born lined the walls, their sightless eyes tracking the students like silent judges. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and a dozen simmering poisons. It was a place where light came to die, and today, it felt like the very walls were closing in on Harry. Since the encounter with Quirrell in the Great Hall, the cold in Harry's mind had become a brittle sheet of ice. The resonance, the psychic shriek of the fragment in his head, had settled into a low-frequency vibration that made his teeth ache. He's close, Riddle whispered, his voice now a seductive purr. My main self is just floors away, Harry. Can't you feel the symmetry? We are two halves of a broken god. If you let me go, if you just crack the door an inch, I can bridge the gap. We can end this masquerade. You aren't a god, Tom, Harry thought, his hand steady as he prepared his silver knife. You're a stowaway, and I'm not cracking the door. I'm reinforcing the hinges. At the front of the room, Snape slammed his ledger shut. The sound was like a gunshot. There will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this class, Snape began, his voice a low, dangerous silk. He paced the front of the room, his eyes scanning the Gryffindors with contempt and the Slytherins with a cold, professional expectation. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art of potion making. However, for those few, able students, he stopped directly in front of Harry's desk. The silence stretched until it was uncomfortable, then drifted into the territory of the unbearable. Potter, Snape said, his voice dropping an octave. Our new icon. Tell me, what would I get if I added powder root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Beside Harry, Hermione's hand shot into the air like a reflex, but Harry didn't look at her. He looked at Snape. He looked at the man's hands, which were stained with the juices of 100 ingredients. He saw the tremor in the professor's fingers. You'd get the draft of living death, Professor, Harry said. His voice was a flat, tonal vacuum, a sleep so deep it mimics the grave. Snape's eyes flickered. It was the correct answer, but Harry hadn't given it with the eagerness of a student. He'd given it with the weariness of someone who had seen the grave and found it lacking. And where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? The stomach of a goat. It's an antidote to most poisons. But not all. And the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They are the same plant. They also go by the name of aconite. Harry paused, leaning forward just a fraction of an inch. Quote, though in the Victorian language of flowers, asphodel is a type of lily. And it means, my regrets follow you to the grave. Wormwood means, bitter absence. You aren't asking me about potions, Professor. You're asking me if I understand your mourning. The dungeon went so quiet that the dripping of a leaky faucet across the room sounded like a sledgehammer. The Gryffindors looked confused, but Th. E. Slytherins, the ones who lived on subtext and secrets, held their breath. Snape's face didn't just go pale, it went translucent. For a heartbeat, the terrifying potions master vanished, replaced by a man who looked like he had been hollowed out by a storm. The rage in his eyes died, replaced by raw, bleeding vulnerability that Harry recognized from his own internal library of pain. Sit down, Snape whispered. He didn't take points. He didn't insult James. He simply turned his back and walked to his desk, his shoulders hunched as if he were carrying the weight of the castle. A masterstroke, Riddle chuckled. You didn't just lever him, Harry. You gutted him. He'll never look at you without seeing her ghost now. You've turned his hatred into a leash. The rest of the lesson was a blur. Grinding beetles and boiling cauldrons. Harry worked with a surgical precision that made his partner, a nervous Theodore Nott, stay out of his way. As Harry bottled his perfect cure for boils, he felt a gaze on the back of his neck. He turned. Across the room, Draco Malfoy was staring at him, but the arrogance was gone. In its place was a flicker of something new, respect born of fear. Malfoy had seen Harry stare down the most feared man in the school and win. The hierarchy of Slytherin was shifting, and Harry Potter was ascending the throne without saying a word. As the class ended and the students scrambled to leave, Snape called out, Potter, stay. Harry waited until the last Gryffindor had vanished up the stairs. He stood before Snape's desk, his expression a blank slate. How do you know that? Snape asked. He was staring at a jar of flobberworms, not looking at Harry. The language of flowers. That isn't in your textbooks. I spent 10 years in a cupboard, Professor, Harry said. I read anything I could find. And I learned that people rarely say what they mean. They hide their truths in symbols because the reality is too heavy to carry. Snape finally looked up. His black eyes searched Harry's face, searching for a trace of the father he loathed. You are not your father, he said, the words sounding like an admission of defeat. He was loud. He was arrogant. He was obvious. You are something else entirely. There is a coldness in you, Potter. It's not the cold of a winter's night. It's the cold of the deep ocean. The ocean is where things are buried, Professor, Harry said. I'm good at burying things. I suspect you are too. Snape leaned back, his fingers steepled. Dumbledore thinks you are the key to the future. He thinks you are the shield that will protect us from the shadow. But I look at you, and I see the shadow itself. Maybe you need a shadow to fight a shadow, Harry said. The headmaster is a man of light. Light is easy to see. It's easy to anticipate. But the man in the turban, he doesn't fear the light. He feeds on it. Snape went rigid. What do you know of Professor Quirrell? I know that my scar only hurts when he turns his back to me, Harry said, turning to leave. And I know that whatever is behind that trapdoor on the 3rd floor is the only thing he wants. If you want to protect her memory, Professor, stop watching me. Start watching the man who's actually trying to burn down the world. Harry walked out of the dungeon before Snape could respond. He didn't head for the Great Hall. He headed for the 3rd floor. The castle felt alive tonight. The torches flickered as he passed, and the portraits whispered his name, their painted eyes wide with curiosity. He reached the forbidden corridor. The door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron and laced with a locking charm that would have stumped any first year. Harry didn't use his wand. He closed his eyes and touched the wood. He sank. He bypassed the physical lock and looked at the magic underneath. It was a complex web of golden threads, woven by Dumbledore's own hand. It was beautiful, but to an Occlumens who spent his life mapping the architecture of a soul, It was just another puzzle. Let me help, Riddle whispered. I know this weave. It's a variation on the Merlinian lock. If you pull the thread at the bottom left, the whole thing will unravel for 10 seconds. Enough time for us to see the beast. I don't need your help, Tom, Harry thought, but he saw the thread Riddle was talking about. He reached out with his mind and tugged. The door clicked open. The room was dark, but Harry could see perfectly. In the center of the chamber stood a dog that should have been a myth. It was the size of a carriage, with 3 massive heads, each one dripping with thick, ropey strands of saliva. Its breath smelled of rotted meat and old copper. The beast was sleeping, but as Harry stepped inside, one of its ears twitched. Cerberus, Riddle hissed. Hagrid's little pet, a brood of a guardian. Look under its paws, Harry. The trapdoor. Harry saw it, a square of wood hidden beneath the dog's massive, clawed feet. He could feel heat radiating from below, the Philosopher's Stone. It was like a second sun, buried deep in the earth. Suddenly, the dog's middle head opened an eye. A large, yellow, murderous eye. It didn't growl, it inhaled, a sound like a vacuum, preparing to let out a roar that would alert the entire castle. Sleep, Harry commanded. He didn't speak it, he projected it. He took the cold from the vault, the absolute crushing stillness of his mind, and he slammed it into the dog's consciousness. It wasn't a spell, it was a psychic override. He forced the beast to feel the weight of 1,000 years of slumber. The dog's head dropped back onto its paws with a heavy thud. The yellow eye closed. Harry stood over the trapdoor, his heart rate unhurried. He could hear the stone humming. It was calling to the fragment in his head, promising it a body, promising it a life. Take it, Riddle pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. Take it now. We can be whole. We can be unstoppable. Not yet, Harry whispered. A trapdoor isn't just an entrance, Tom. It's a funnel. Dumbledore wants the thief to go down there. He wants to catch them in the maze. Harry turned and walked back into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind him. He had seen what he needed to see. The defenses were physical, elemental, and psychological. A gauntlet designed to test a hero. But Harry wasn't a hero. He was a tactician. As he walked back toward the Slytherin common room, he saw a shadow move in the darkness of a nearby alcove. Curiosity killed the cat, Mr. Potter. It was Quirrell. He was leaning against a statue of a one-eyed witch. His turban slightly lopsided. He was smiling, but it was the smile of a shark. I was just lost, Professor, Harry said, his hand hovering near his wand. The stairs move so much. It's hard to keep one's bearings. Is that SS so? Quirrell's stutter was back, but it sounded forced, like a bad actor overplaying a role. You should be more careful. There are dangers in this castle that a young boy shouldn't face. Harry stepped closer, letting his scar burn. He wanted to feel the enemy. I'm not a young boy, Professor. I'm a survivor. And survivors have a habit of seeing things they aren't supposed to. The two of them stood in the corridor, the silence between them charged with the energy of two predators measuring each other up. Go to bed, Harry, Quirrell whispered. Before the SS shadows decide they don't like you. Harry walked past him, his shoulder brushing Quirrell's arm. The touch felt like an electric shock. In the vault, Riddle screamed one last time before falling into a terrified silence. Harry didn't look back. He had confirmed two things tonight. First, Snape was his. He had the man's grief pinned to the wall. Second, the war for the stone had begun. But as Harry Potter lay in his green curtained bed that night, he wasn't dreaming of gold or immortality. He was dreaming of a larger cage. Because if he was going to trap the man under the turban, he was going to need more than just obsidian walls. He was going to need the stone to power the lock. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 8. The Weight of the Mountain. Halloween at Hogwarts usually tasted like pumpkin juice and nervous laughter, but tonight, the air in the Great Hall tasted like copper. Harry sat at the Slytherin table, his fork resting motionless against his plate. The enchanted ceiling above was a swirling vortex of slate-gray clouds and jagged lightning, reflecting the storm brewing in the basement of his soul. Beside him, the other Slytherins were gorging themselves, their chatter a dull hum that he had long ago tuned out. He's moving, Riddle's voice was a jagged rasp in the vault. The parasite is in the tunnels. I can feel the hunger of the main soul, Harry. It's a void that wants to swallow the world. He's released the beast. A diversion. A classic, crude, effective diversion. The troll, Harry thought. A 12-foot mountain of muscle and stupidity. It's loud enough to pull the staff to the dungeons, leaving the third floor unguarded. Suddenly, the doors of the great hall burst open. Professor Quirrell came sprinting in, his turban askew, his face a mask of practiced terror. "Troll, in the dungeon," he shrieked, before collapsing face first onto the floor. The hall erupted into a panicked roar. Dumbledore stood, his voice thundering over the chaos to command the prefects to lead their houses to the dormitories. Harry didn't move. He watched the teachers sweep out of the room, Snape's black robes billowy. As he veered away from the group, heading, as Harry expected, toward the third floor to intercept the thief. "Change of plans, Tom," Harry whispered internally as he slipped under the table and melded into the shadows of the stone walls. "We aren't going for the stone tonight. We're going for the troll." "Why?" Riddle demanded. "The stone is the prize. Why waste your energy on a mindless brute?" "Because a troll isn't just a monster," Harry said, moving through the deserted corridors with the silence of a ghost. "It's a massive output of raw, physical magic. If I can't contain a troll's essence, how can I hope to contain your master?" He didn't go toward the dungeons. He followed the scent of rotted meat and wet earth toward the girls' bathroom on the first floor. He had seen Hermione Granger flee the hall earlier in tears. The logic of the narrative dictated that she would be the victim, and the victim would be the anchor for the cold. The sound reached him first, the rhythmic, one crushing thud of a club hitting stone. Then, the scream. It was high, sharp, and filled with the realization of mortality. Harry stepped into the bathroom. The air was thick with the dust of shattered porcelain and the stench of the beast. The troll was a hideous colossus, its skin the color of a bruise, its tiny eyes glowing with a dull, murderous light. It raised its massive wooden club, appearing to turn the cubicle where Hermione was hiding into a splintered grave. "Move, Hermione," Harry said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the troll's grunting like a razor. The girl looked out from under the sink, her face ghostly pale. "Harry, get out, it'll kill you." The troll turned. It blinked its slow, stupid eyes at the small boy standing in the doorway. It let out a roar that vibrated the marrow in Harry's bones and swung the club. Harry didn't jump. He didn't use a shield charm. He opened the vault. In his mind, he didn't see the bathroom. He saw the obsidian panopticon. He reached out and grabbed the absolute, crushing vacuum of his occlumency, and he didn't just use it to shield his mind. He projected it outward, wrapping it around the troll like a shroud. The club stopped an inch from Harry's head. The troll frozen. It wasn't a paralysis spell, it was a mental overload. Harry was forcing the beast's primitive brain to process the concept of infinite nothingness. The troll's knees buckled. It dropped the club, its hands clawing at its head as it let out a low, whimpering moan. "Tom," Harry commanded. "Feed." With pleasure. The fragment in Harry's head surged forward. A spectral, gray mist began to seep out of Harry's scar, coiling through the air like a snake. It lunged at the troll, sinking into the creature's chest. The troll's eyes rolled back in its head. Its massive body began to wither, the muscles shrinking, the gray skin turning to ash. It wasn't dying. Its very life force, its magical weight, was being siphoned directly into the vault. Inside Harry's mind, the obsidian walls began to glow with a dull, thrumming violet light. The prison was expanding. New corridors were forming, deeper and darker than before. The prisoner, Tom Riddle, stood in his cell, his form becoming terrifyingly solid as he drank the troll's vitality. "Stop," Harry whispered. The mist snapped back into his forehead. The troll slumped to the floor, a hollowed-out husk of its former self. It was still alive, but its spirit was broken, its magic gone. Harry stood in the center of the wreckage, his breath steady, his eyes glowing with a faint, predatory green. He felt heavy, as if he had just swallowed a mountain. "Harry," he turned. Hermione was standing by the sinks, her eyes wide with a terror that was no longer directed at the troll. She was looking at him, really looking at him, and she was seeing the monster behind the boy. "What did you do?" she whispered. "That wasn't a spell. That was something else." Harry walked toward her. He didn't stop until he was inches away. He could hear her heart drumming against her ribs. "The books you read, Hermione," Harry said, his voice a cold caress. "They tell you that magic is about words and wand movements. They lie. Magic is about will. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice to keep the world in its cage. You stole something from it," she said, her voice trembling. "I felt it. The air went dead. I took its burden," Harry said. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were ice cold. "If you tell anyone what you saw, Hermione, I'll have to give that burden to you. And you aren't strong enough to carry it." She nodded, a single, jerky movement. She was a girl who valued logic above all else, and logic here was simple. Harry Potter was the most dangerous thing in this castle, and he had just saved her life with a horror she couldn't name. "Good," Harry said. He heard footsteps in the corridor, heavy, hurried. Snape, McGonagall, and Quirrell burst into the room. Snape's eyes immediately went to Harry, then to the shriveled, unconscious troll. His gaze narrowed, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of the cold, still lingering in the air. He looked at Harry's scar, which was pulsing with a dark, angry light. "Explain," McGonagall gasped, her hand to her throat. "He saved me," Hermione blurted out, her voice shaky but determined. She looked at Harry, then at the teachers. "I came looking for the troll. I thought I could deal with it. I've read about them, you see. Harry followed me. He used a banishing charm on the club. It hit the troll on the head. It was a perfect lie. Simple, believable." Snape stepped closer to Harry. He leaned down, his face inches from the boy's. "A banishing charm, Potter. From a first year, to knock out a fully grown mountain troll. I have a lot of nervous energy, Professor," Harry said. He let a small, mocking smile touch his lips. "And I've always been good at hitting things in the right spot." Snape didn't look convinced. He looked at the troll again, his eyes lingering on the way the creature's skin seemed to hang off its bones. He knew. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew the boy was a liar. 5 points will be awarded to each of you," McGonagall said, her voice still thin with shock. "For sheer dumb luck. Now, to your dormitories. Both of you." As they walked out, Quirrell lingered in the doorway. Harry felt the white-hot needle of his scar flare up. He turned and looked at the defense teacher. Quirrell wasn't looking at the troll. He was looking at Harry's hands. "V versus very impressive, P.P. Potter," Quirrell whispered. "AGG gift for SS subduing the unruly. It's a family trait," Harry said, his eyes locking onto the back of Quirrell's head, where the hidden master was surely listening. "We're very good at keeping things where they belong." That night, Harry sat in the Slytherin common room, watching the green lake water press against the glass. He went into the vault. The basement had changed. It was no longer just a prison, it was a fortress. The walls were reinforced with the dense, earthen magic of the troll. Riddle was no longer a fragment, he was a presence. He sat on a throne of obsidian in the center of his cell, his eyes burning with a dark, reflected glory. "You're getting stronger, Harry," Riddle said. His voice was no longer a hiss, it was a baritone command. "But so am I. The more you feed the vault, the more I become part of the architecture. One day, you won't be able to tell where the cage ends and I begin." "That's the point, Tom," Harry said, standing at the edge of the abyss. "I'm not just building a prison for you. I'm building a body for me. A body that can't be broken. A body that can't be killed." He looked at the violet glow of the walls. He felt the weight of the mountain in his soul. The troll was just the beginning. There were other monsters in this castle. There were older, darker magics waiting in the shadows. And Harry Potter was going to eat them all. He was the boy who lived. But in the dark, he was the god of the void. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Mirror of Shadows. Winter arrived at Hogwarts like a conquering army. The great lake froze into a sheet of opaque jade, and the wind howled through the battlements, carrying the scent of frost and impending blood. For Harry, the cold outside was a comfort. It matched the temperature of the vault, which had become a sprawling, subterranean labyrinth fed by the remnants of the Halloween troll. The Quidditch match against Gryffindor wasn't a game, it was a theater of war. Harry sat high in the Slytherin stands, his green and silver scarf wrapped tightly around his neck, his eyes fixed on the sky. He wasn't watching the snitch. He was watching the players, specifically, he was watching the way the air shimmered around Professor Snape and Professor Quirrell in the teacher's stands. "He's going to do it today," Riddle whispered. The prisoner was pacing a new wing of the vault, his footsteps echoing like thunder. "The parasite is impatient. He needs to test your limits. He needs to see if the boy who lived is a shield or a hollow shell." Let him test, Harry thought. Testing implies a lack of data. I'm about to give him more than he can process. As the game reached a fever pitch, Harry felt the shift. It wasn't a sound, but a sudden drop in the psychic pressure of the stadium. Below, on his broom, Harry saw the Gryffindor Seeker, the lanky kid, Longbottom, begin to jerk uncontrollably. His broom was bucking like a wild animal, trying to hurl him into the frozen turf hundreds of feet below. Harry's scar didn't burn, it froze. It felt like a shard of dry ice was being pressed into his frontal lobe. Across the pitch, he saw Quirrell staring intently at the boy on the broom, his lips moving in a silent, jagged incantation. But near him, Snape was also muttering, his eyes fixed on the broom as well. A dual-channel jinx, Riddle analyzed, his voice dripping with professional interest. Quirrell is trying to kill the boy to cause a distraction. Snape is trying to counter curse. They are locked in a battle of wills, and the boy is the rope in their tug of war. It's messy, Harry said. I don't like messy. Harry closed his eyes. He didn't reach for his wand. Instead, he reached for the cold. He sank deep into the vault, past the library, past the memories of the cupboard, down to the core where the troll's essence had been forged into a series of massive psychic dampeners. He didn't target the broom. He targeted the connection. In the mental realm, Harry saw two threads of magic stretching across the pitch. One was a sickly, pulsating violet, Quirrell. The other was a deep, mournful indigo, Snape. Harry didn't cut them, he grabbed them. He projected his consciousness into the space between the two professors. He became a psychic lightning rod. He took the violet heat and the indigo cold and funneled them both directly into the vault. The effect in the physical world was instantaneous. Quirrell gasped, his head snapping back as if he'd been punched. Snape stumbled, his eyes wide with a sudden, overwhelming sense of vertigo. The broom stopped bucking and Longbottom slumped over the handle, gasping for air. But the cost was high. Inside Harry's mind, the vault shivered. The violet energy of Voldemort's jinx slammed into the obsidian walls, cracking the foundations. Harry, Riddle screamed, his form flickering. The stolen magic roared through the corridors. You are bringing him inside. Stop. You are giving him the coordinates. I'm giving him a taste, Harry groaned, blood beginning to trickle from his nose. I want him to know what's waiting for him. He held the connection for 3 seconds, 3 seconds of pure, unadulterated agony as the Dark Lord's malice poured into his subconscious. He saw flashes of a dark forest, a stone bowl filled with silver liquid, and a pair of red eyes that promised a slow, agonizing death. Then, he snapped the link. The stadium erupted into cheers as Longbottom safely landed. But Harry was already moving. He pushed through the crowd, his movements jerky, his vision swimming in a sea of emerald green. He needed to be alone. He needed to reinforce the Gatesby. Riddle used the chaos to slip his chains. He found himself in a deserted corridor on the 4th floor. He leaned against the stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Tom, report. The walls held, Riddle panted. His voice shaken, but he felt us. He felt the vacuum. He knows there is a sinkhole in your mind, Harry. He knows you aren't just a boy. He knows you're a competitor. Good, Harry whispered. He moved further down the hall, seeking the silence of the unused classrooms. He pushed open a door at the end of the corridor and stopped. The room was empty except for a massive, ornate mirror that reached the ceiling. It had clawed feet and a gold frame inscribed with strange lettering. Arised straw eru oytube kafru oyt on woshi. Harry walked toward it. He didn't need to add the inscription backward to know what it was. He knew the lore. This was the mirror of Arised. It showed the heart's deepest desire. Don't look, Riddle warned, his voice uncharacteristically small. Desire is a leak in the boat, Harry. It's the one thing an Occlumens cannot wall off. If you see what you want, you give it power over the cold. I don't want anything, Tom, Harry said, stepping in front of the glass. The mirror didn't show his mother. It didn't show his father. It didn't show him as a king or a hero. It showed Harry standing in a room of infinite white. There were no walls. There were no cupboards. There was no cold. In the mirror, Harry was holding a small, silver key. And behind him, the vault was gone. Tom Riddle was gone. The world was silent. Not the silence of a grave, but the silence of peace. Harry stared at the reflection. He saw himself without the scar. He saw a version of Harry Potter that had never been a jailer. A tear hit the floor. Is that it? Riddle sneered, though there was no bite in it. You want to be normal. You want to be empty. How pathetic. I want to be finished, Harry whispered. Suddenly, a shadow appeared in the glass behind him. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts, a soft, musical voice said. Harry didn't jump. He didn't turn around. He watched Albus Dumbledore's reflection appear beside his own. The headmaster looked old, older than he had in the Great Hall. His blue eyes weren't twinkling, they were searching. "And what do you see, Harry?" Dumbledore asked. Harry wiped his face with his sleeve, his expression returning to its habitual, icy mask. "I see a man who shouldn't be wandering the halls at night, Headmaster. It's dangerous for someone of your age." Dumbledore smiled, a sad, knowing curve of the lips. "Danger is an old friend of mine. But you see a world without a burden. A world where the door is finally unlocked." Harry finally turned. "You've been watching the third floor. You saw the jinx at the match. You know what's happening." "I know that a great deal of weight has been placed on very young shoulders," Dumbledore said, stepping closer. "And I know that sometimes, the things we lock away grow stronger in the dark. You are a natural Occlumens, Harry. Perhaps the greatest I have ever seen. But even the strongest dam will be weak if the river is never allowed to flow." "I'm not a dam," Harry said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. "I'm a cage, and the river is a monster." Dumbledore's gaze moved to Harry's scar. "Is he screaming tonight, Harry? Does he tell you secrets in the dark?" Harry felt the vault rumble. Riddle was trying to hide, trying to make himself small, terrified of the old man's light. "He tells me that you're a man who uses children as bait," Harry said. "He tells me that the stone is a lure, and I'm the hook." "Is he wrong?" Dumbledore sighed. The air in the room grew heavy with the weight of a century of secrets. "The world is not a place of easy choices, Harry. Sometimes we must choose between what is right and what is easy. I chose to protect the many. You are choosing to protect yourself." "I'm choosing to win," Harry corrected. "And if I have to turn my mind into a graveyard to do it, then I'll start digging the holes." Harry walked toward the door, but he stopped at the threshold. "Headmaster," Harry said, not looking back. "The mirror. What do you see?" Dumbledore was silent for a long time. I see myself holding a pair of thick, woolen socks. One can never have enough socks." "You're a liar," Harry said. "But you're a good one. We'll get along fine." Harry walked out into the cold, dark hallway. He didn't go back to the Slytherin common room. He went to the library. He needed more architecture, more reinforcement. He had seen the face of his piece, and it was a lie. There was no silver key. There was no white room. There was only the obsidian and the prisoner. And as the first snow of December began to fall against the window panes, Harry Potter realized that he didn't want the door to be unlocked. He wanted to be the one who owned the building. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Architect's Descent. Spring at Hogwarts was a cruel joke. The sun flickered across the grounds, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the stone skin of the castle. Nor the freezing depths of Harry's psyche. The cold had become a permanent weather system in his mind. It was no longer a state of focus, it was his default reality. In the vault, the violet cracks from the Quidditch match had been patched with the harvested essence of every magical creature Harry had encountered since Halloween, the residual slime of a dead flobberworm, the static electricity of a stray Kneasel. The raw fear of a corridor full of panicked first years. Every scrap of power was compressed into the obsidian. "He's ready," Riddle whispered, his voice vibrating with a sickening anticipation. "The parasite has found the rhythm of the wards. He knows Dumbledore is being summoned away. Tonight, Harry, tonight the Master goes for the stone. And tonight," Harry thought, staring at his reflection in a cup of tea in the Great Hall, "the Master finds out that the basement has been expanded." The news of Dumbledore's urgent owl from the Ministry was a ripple of manufactured chaos. Harry watched the headmaster leave, his silver beard flowing like a flag of surrender. He knew Dumbledore wasn't truly fooled. The old man was clearing the board, moving the pieces so the endgame could commence. He wanted the thief to enter the trap. He just didn't realize that the trap had its own agenda. As night fell, Harry moved. He didn't seek out Ron or Hermione. He didn't need witnesses. He didn't need a team. He was a singular entity. He reached the third-floor corridor. The silence was absolute, a heavy, velvet cloak that dampened the sound of his footsteps. The door to the chamber was already ajar. Harry stepped inside. Fluffy, the three-headed nightmare, was no longer snarling. A harp sat in the corner, playing itself with a ghostly, rhythmic pluck. The beast was snoring, its 6 eyes shut tight, its massive heads lolling like overgrown puppies. "A simple charm," Harry murmured, his eyes tracking the soot on the floor. "He's already through." "Go," Riddle urged. "Through the trapdoor. We are losing time. If he drinks the elixir, you will never be able to hold him." "He won't drink it, Tom. He doesn't have the key." Harry dropped through the trapdoor. He didn't fall. He willed the air to thicken, descending into the darkness like a feather made of lead. He landed on something soft, writhing, and wet. The devil's snare. The plant's tentacles coiled around his ankles, sensing the heat of his blood, tightening with the speed of a strangler's noose. Harry didn't struggle. He didn't cast a fire spell. He simply looked at the plant. He projected the cold, the absolute, soul-crushing stillness of the void. He showed the plant a world where the sun had died, where there was no warmth to seek, no life to consume. The devil's snare didn't just let go, it recoiled. It shriveled back into the shadows, hissing as if it had touched a freezing star. Harry walked through the next door into a chamber of wings. Thousands of jewel-bright keys flitted through the air like birds of prey. In the center of the room, a broomstick hovered. At the far end, a heavy oak door remained locked. Looking for the silver key with the broken wing, Harry noted, his eyes scanning the swarm. "Don't play their games," Riddle hissed. "The lock is a physical manifestation of a magical intent. Use the vault." Harry closed his eyes. He reached out with his mind, not to catch a key, but to communicate with the door. He didn't ask it to open. He convinced the door that it was already a part of the obsidian prison. He rewrote the door's reality. The lock disintegrated. The oak groaned and swung inward. The next room was a graveyard of giants. The wizard's chessboard was a field of bloodied marble and jagged stone. The pieces were massive, their swords and shields stained with the imaginary blood of 1,000 matches. The White Queen stood in his path, her face a mask of cold, porcelain fury. She raised her sword, a 10-foot blade of marble that would have crushed a man in seconds. "Checkmate is a limitation of the rules," Harry said. He didn't move a piece. He walked straight at the queen. As she swung the sword, Harry didn't flinch. He channeled the troll's weight, the dense, physical magic he'd stolen on Halloween. He turned his mental projection into a wall of pure mass. The marble sword struck Harry's shoulder and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The queen frozen, her stone eyes widening as she felt the cold seep into her joints. Harry walked past her, the sound of his boots echoing in the sudden, terrified silence of the board. Room of the troll was already finished. The beast was sprawled across the floor, unconscious, a victim of Quirrell's crude but effective magic. Harry didn't stop to look. He moved to the final obstacle, the potions. The purple fire and the black fire roared to life, sealing the entrances. On the table sat 7 bottles and a scroll of logic. Harry didn't read the scroll. He didn't sniff the bottles. He could smell the poison and the protection through the air. He could feel the resonance of the magic. He picked up the smallest bottle, the one that would lead him through the black fire. "Ready, Tom." "I have never been more ready," the prisoner replied, his form in the vault now towering, a dark king standing at the precipice of his liberation. Harry drank the potion. It felt like ice water in his veins. He walked through the black flames. The final chamber was not a dungeon. It was a cathedral of shadow. In the center stood the mirror of Arised, its gold frame glowing with a sickly, internal light. And before the mirror stood Quirrell. The professor wasn't stuttering. He wasn't twitching. He stood with a terrifying, rigid grace, his hands pressing against the glass. "I see it," Quirrell whispered, his voice a rasping echo of a man. "I see myself presenting the stone to my master. But I cannot touch it." "Why can I not touch it?" "Because you want it," Harry said, his voice echoing in the vast, cold space. "And the mirror only gives to those who don't." Quirrell turned. His face was a ruin, the skin gray and papery, the eyes sunken and bloodshot. But as he looked at Harry, a smile of genuine, horrific delight spread across his lips. "The boy who lived," Quirrell said. "The boy with the basement. My master was right. You are a fascinating specimen, Harry. You didn't just survive the curse. You swallowed it." "Where is he?" Harry asked, his hand drifting to his wand, though he knew wood wouldn't be enough for this. "Tell the parasite to stop hiding behind your cowardice." Quirrell's smile vanished. "You speak of things you cannot understand. My master is not a parasite. He is the dawn. And you are the eclipse. Use the boy." A voice hissed. It was a sound that didn't come from Quirrell's mouth. It came from everywhere. It was the sound of a snake sliding over dry bone. It was the voice that had haunted Harry's nights for 10 years, but louder, fuller, and dripping with an ancient, lethal hunger. "See, come here, Potter," Quirrell commanded, his voice cracking. "Look in the mirror. Tell me what you see." Harry walked forward. He stood before the glass. In the mirror, he saw himself. He saw the Harry Potter who was a jailer. But this time, the reflection wasn't holding a key. The reflection was reaching into its own chest, pulling out a blood-red stone, a stone that throbbed like a heart. Harry felt a sudden, massive weight in his pocket. He didn't look down. He didn't react. Well, Quirrell barked. What do you see? I see myself winning the House Cup. Harry lied. I see Snape looking disappointed. I see a quiet summer. He lies. The voice hissed. He has it. I can feel the resonance. The stone is in the cage. Quirrell lunged. His hands, cold and smelling of decay, wrapped around Harry's throat. But the moment he touched Harry's skin, Quirrell screamed. His hands began to blister and smoke, the flesh turning to ash as if he'd touched a white-hot coal. He fell back, howling in agony, staring at his blackened palms. What is this? Quirrell shrieked. What magic is this? It's not magic, Harry said, stepping over him. It's a rejection. You're a vessel for a man who can't feel love, and I'm a vessel for a man who can't feel anything but the cold. Let me speak to him, the voice commanded. Quirrell trembled. Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough for this. Quirrell reached up and began to unwrap his turban. The purple cloth fell to the floor in long, winding coils. Quirrell turned his back to Harry. Where the back of a head should have been, there was a face. It was a face carved from a nightmare, chalk white, with slit-like nostrils and wide, red eyes that burned with a fire that had been stoked in hell. Harry Potter, the face whispered. The resonance hit Harry like a physical blow. In his mind, the vault erupted. Tom Riddle's fragment threw himself against the obsidian, his screams joining the roar of the Dark Lord's presence. The walls cracked. The cold began to leak. Master, the fragment shrieked. I am here. Break the lock. So, Voldemort whispered, his red eyes fixed on Harry's. The piece of me I lost, it didn't die. It found a home in the darkness of a child. You have kept me in a cupboard for 10 years, Harry. You have treated a god like a common prisoner. You weren't a god when you hit the floor in Godric's Hollow, Harry said, his voice trembling but his gaze unbroken. You were a stain. I just gave the stain a place to dry. Give me the stone, Harry, Voldemort urged, his voice becoming soft, almost fatherly. Think of what we could do. Together, we are the complete soul. We could rewrite the laws of life and death. You wouldn't have to be a jailer anymore. You could be a creator. I like being a jailer, Harry said. It's the only thing in this world that makes sense. Then you shall die a jailer. Voldemort roared. Kill him. Take the stone. Quirrell lunged again. Harry didn't use his wand. He didn't try to run. He closed his eyes and did the one thing he had been training for since the age of 2. He didn't just project the cold. He inverted it. He opened every gate in the vault. He let the obsidian walls crumble. He let the troll's weight, the dragon's fire, and the prisoner's rag. He fled out of his mind and into the physical world. He didn't just touch Quirrell, he consumed him. Harry grabbed Quirrell's face. The contact was an explosion of psychic and physical energy. Quirrell's skin disintegrated. His bones turned to dust. The man was being erased by the sheer volume of the cold and the fire of the soul fragment's joy. No, Voldemort screamed as his host vanished into ash. The Dark Lord's spirit, a massive, billowing cloud of black smoke, tore itself out of the remains of Quirrell. It hovered in the air, a screaming wraith of pure malice. It lunged at Harry, sing through him with the force of a freight train. Harry fell to his knees. The world went black. Inside his mind, the vault was a ruin. The obsidian was shattered. The library was on fire. And in the center of the wreckage, Tom Riddle stood free. He looked down at Harry, his face no longer a fragment, but a masterpiece of dark intent. The doors are open, Harry, Tom said, his voice echoing in the empty space of Harry's subconscious. The master is gone, but I am still here. And I'm not going back in the box. Harry looked up from the floor of his own mind. He was bleeding. He was broken, but in his hand, he held the Philosopher's Stone. You're right, Tom, Harry whispered. You're not going back in the box. Harry squeezed the stone. He channeled the elixir of life, not into his body, but into the cold. He used the stone's infinite energy to rebuild the vault in a heartbeat. The obsidian didn't just return, it turned to diamond. The walls didn't just rise, they became absolute. I'm building a new box, Harry said, and this one has no doors. Before Riddle could react, the diamond walls slammed shut. The prisoner was encased in a block of solidified eternity, powered by the very essence of life itself. Outside, in the chamber of the mirror, Harry Potter lay unconscious on the cold stone floor. The stone in his pocket was glowing with a faint, dying light. He had won. He had survived the Dark Lord. He had trapped the fragment. But as the sound of Dumbledore's boots echoed in the distance, Harry's subconscious drifted into a dreamless sleep. The boy who lived was a legend. The boy who locked the door was a myth. But the boy who swallowed the sun, he was just getting started. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Diamond Panopticon. Summer was a fever dream of boredom and bile. Harry had returned to Privet Drive not as a victim, but as a silent tenant. The Dursleys no longer shouted. They didn't even look at him. They moved through the house like ghosts, sensing that the boy in the smallest bedroom was no longer tethered to the laws of their world. Harry spent those months in a state of deep, meditative hibernation, his consciousness entirely used on the integration of the Philosopher's Stone's residual energy into the vault. The obsidian was gone. The new prison was made of diamond light, a crystalline structure that didn't just contain Tom Riddle, it processed him. Every thought the fragment had was now visible to Harry. Every memory was a file in a searchable database. When the second year began, the atmosphere at Hogwarts had shifted from wonder to a stifling, paranoid dread. The celebrity of the boy who lived had curdled into something sharper. Students moved aside in the corridors as Harry passed, his green eyes now possessing a subtle, rhythmic pulse that matched the ticking of a clock. "He looks different," Ron whispered to Hermione as they watched Harry sit at the end of the Slytherin table, his plate untouched. "He looks like he's made of glass." "He's not glass, Ron," Hermione said, her voice trembling. "He's a vacuum. He's pulling the light out of the room." Harry didn't hear them. He was staring at the staff table. Gilderoy Lockhart, the new defense against the dark arts teacher, was a neon-bright stain on the castle's ancient dignity. He was a man made of teeth and lies, his every gesture a calculated performance. "He is a hollow man." Riddle's voice echoed within the Diamond Panopticon. The fragment was no longer screaming. He was seated in a chair of light, his expression one of bored, aristocratic disdain. "His mind is a shallow pool, Harry. One breeze and he would shatter. Why do you let him breathe the same air as us?" "Because hollow men are useful containers, Tom," Harry thought. "And B, 'cause I'm waiting for the chamber to open." The first attack happened on Halloween, the anniversary of the first cage. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was found hanging from a torch bracket, petrified. The message on the wall glowed with a crimson, oily light: "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." The school erupted in chaos, but Harry felt a strange, cold resonance. It wasn't the violent, jagged heat of the master he had faced under the turban. This was different. It was a rhythmic, scratching vibration, like a quill moving over parchment. He found the Sork, in the most unlikely of places, the hands of a terrified, red-headed girl. Ginny Weasley sat in the great hall, her face a mask of gray exhaustion. She was clutching a small, black diary to her chest as if it were a heart. "That," Riddle stood up in the vault, his eyes widening. "That is mine. Not a fragment, not a memory, that is my shadow. My soul preserved in ink. A Horcrux," Harry mused. "You were busy in the 50s, Tom. It's another piece of me, Harry." Riddle's voice rose, filled with a desperate, predatory hunger. "If you bring that diary into the vault, if you merge the ink with the light, we won't just be strong. We will be complete. We will have the memories of the air." "I don't want to merge, Tom," Harry said. "I want to archive." The weeks that followed were a slow-motion car crash. The attacks continued. Colin Creevey, Justin Finch Fletchley, and finally, Hermione. When Harry saw her petrified form in the hospital wing, her hand frozen in a gesture of warning, the Diamond Panopticon shivered. The cold turned into a localized blizzard. "You're losing control, Harry," Riddle taunted. "The shadow in the diary is smarter than I am. He's using the girl. He's draining her. Soon, he will walk the halls in a body of flesh, and you will still be a boy in a school uniform." "He won't walk anywhere," Harry said. "He's a script, and I'm the editor." Harry waited, until the school was paralyzed with fear. He found Ginny in the library, her eyes glazed, her fingers stained with black ink that wouldn't wash off. She was writing, her hand moving with a frantic, mechanical speed. "Give it to me, Ginny," Harry said. She looked up, and for a second, her brown eyes cleared. "Harry, I can't. He's my friend. He understands. He's the only one who listens. He's a parasite eating your childhood," Harry said, stepping into her space. He didn't use his wand. He simply opened a small, controlled vent in the diamond panopticon. The cold poured out. The temperature in the library dropped 20 degrees. Ginny gasped, her breath frosting in the air. The diary in her hand began to vibrate, a low, angry hum that sounded like a swarm of bees. "Drop it," Harry commanded. Ginny's hand opened as if the leather had turned to red-hot iron. The diary hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud. Harry picked it up. The moment his skin touched the cover, he was hit with a tidal wave of psychic filth. He saw the chamber. He saw the basilisk, a titan of emerald scales and terminal eyes. He saw Tom Riddle at 16, handsome and murderous, laughing as he tore the life out of a girl in a bathroom. Harry didn't pull back. He didn't scream. He smiled. He sat at the table and opened the diary. He picked up a quill and dipped it in his own blood, a small cut on his thumb, a sacrifice for the lock. "My name is Harry Potter," he wrote. The ink stayed on the surface for a moment, then sank deep into the paper. "Hello, Harry Potter," the diary wrote back in an elegant, flowing script. "I have been waiting for you. The boy who survived. The boy with the secret in his head. He knows about us," Harry thought to the prisoner in his mind. "Of course he does," the Vault Riddle replied, his voice a mixture of awe and jealousy. "We are the same song played on different instruments. But he doesn't know about the diamond. He thinks you are an open book. I know what you are keeping, Harry." The diary continued. "I can feel him, the piece of me that you have broken. Why keep him in a cage? Why live as a servant to a school of fools? Together, we can be the king of the monsters." "I'm already the king of the monsters," Harry wrote. "I'm just here to collect the rest of the set." Harry closed the book. He felt the shadow trying to slip into his mind, trying to find a crack in the diamond. It was like a snake trying to bite a mountain. "Tom," Harry said, addressing the prisoner. "I'm going to open the door for a split second. I want you to grab him. Pull the ink into the light. It will be painful," Riddle warned. "For both of us. Pain is just data," Harry said. Harry stood in the center of the library, the diary held between his palms. He didn't use a spell. He used the cold. He shattered the barrier of the panopticon and reached out with a psychic pincer. The diary shrieked. A plume of black smoke erupted from the pages, twisting into the shape of a screaming teenager. The shadow of Tom Riddle clawed at the air, trying to anchor itself to the physical world, trying to drain the life from the books, the floor, the very air. But the vacuum of Harry's mind was stronger. The diamond panopticon roared. The black smoke was sucked into Harry's forehead, a dark ribbon of soul matter being threaded into a needle of light. Harry's eyes turned pitch black. His skin went pale. He felt his heart stop for 3 full seconds. Inside the vault, the two riddles met. The fragment and the shadow slammed into each other. It wasn't a reunion, it was a collision. They tore at each other. Memories clashing, identities merging in a violent, kaleidoscopic explosion of ego. The diamond walls groaned under the pressure of a dual soul integration. Such power. The merged entity roared, its voice now a terrifying, multi-layered harmony of the child, the teen, and the monster. Harry stood over the now blank diary, his breath returning in ragged gasps. He felt immense. He felt as if his mind had expanded to the size of the castle. He could feel the basilisk sleeping in the pipes. He could feel Dumbledore's heartbeat in the headmaster's office. He could feel the fear of every student in the dorms. He looked at his hands. They were translucent, the veins glowing with a faint, diamond light. "You're mine now," Harry whispered to the entity in his head. "Both of you. The memory and the soul. You are the engine, and I am the driver. We are the air," the voice in his head answered, no longer a prisoner, but a part of the machine. "The chamber is ours. The serpent is ours. The school is a feast, Harry. Let us eat." "No," Harry said, walking toward the door. "We aren't going to eat. We're going to clean the house." He headed for Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. He didn't need a password. He didn't need to speak in tongues. The Parseltongue was no longer a gift, it was a fundamental frequency of his being. He stood before the sink with the etched snake. "Open," he thought. The floor groaned. The pipes shifted. The descent began. Harry Potter didn't slide down the pipe, he floated, a diamond-lit god descending into the bowels of the earth. He reached the bottom, stepping over the bones of 1,000 rats. He walked past the giant, shed skin of the basilisk without a glance. He reached the great doors. The carved serpents moved aside before he even arrived. In the center of the Chamber of Secrets, beneath the massive statue of Salazar Slytherin, stood the basilisk. It was a monument of emerald death, its eyes closed, its breath a poisonous fog. "Wake up," Harry commanded. The serpent uncoiled. Its eyes opened. 2 moons of yellow fire that could turn a man's soul to stone. Harry didn't look away. He stared directly into the killing gaze. The diamond panopticon absorbed the death. The cold turned the yellow fire into a harmless glow. The basilisk paused, its ancient, primitive brain confused. It had never seen a human that didn't die. It had never felt a presence that was colder than its own blood. "Speak to it," the merged riddle urged. "Command the king of serpents. Let it taste the blood of the unworthy." "No," Harry said, looking up at the beast. "The serpent is a weapon. And weapons need a proper rack." Harry reached out his hand. He didn't use his wand. He used the cold to bridge the gap between his mind and the monsters. He didn't just want to command it, he wanted to archive it. He began to pull the basilisk's essence, the raw, prehistoric magic of its gaze and its venom, into the panopticon. The snake thrashed, its massive tail shattering the stone pillars of the chamber. It let out a roar that shook the very foundations of Hogwarts. But Harry didn't let go. He stood his ground. As the ceiling began to collapse around him, he was a diamond in the dark, absorbing the emerald fire. 10 minutes later, the chamber went silent. The basilisk was still there, but it was smaller. It was gray. It was empty. It was a shell of a god, its power now stored in a new wing of Harry's mind, the Serpent's Gallery. Harry stood in the center of the ruins, his eyes now glowing with a faint, yellow rim around the green. He felt the weight of the stone, the weight of the troll, the weight of the soul, and the weight of the king. He looked at the statue of Slytherin. "Your legacy is a bit messy, Salazar," Harry said. "I think I'll keep the keys from now on." He walked out of the chamber as the entrance sealed itself behind him. He didn't go to the hospital wing to celebrate. He went to his bed. He had the soul of the air. He had the power of the serpent. The boy who lived was a memory. The boy who locked the door was a myth. The boy who built the panopticon was now the true master of Hogwarts. And the old man in the tower had no idea that the locks had already been changed. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The Warden of Despair. The third year began not with a spark, but with an eclipse. The Hogwarts Express didn't just slow down, it died. The heat vanished from the carriage, replaced by a frost that didn't just coat the windows, it crawled into the lungs. Harry sat in his compartment, his eyes closed, his hands resting on his knees. In the diamond panopticon, the merged riddle entity was pacing, its many-voiced whispers sounding like the static of a dead radio. "They are here," the entity breathed. "The blind ones, the eaters of hope, they are the only things in this world that are colder than you, Harry. Do you feel the resonance? They are coming to see if the cage is empty." The door slid open with a sound like a final breath. A Dementor stood in the threshold. It was a tower of tattered shadow, its face a hooded void, its breath a rattling, wet intake of the world's joy. The air in the compartment turned to lead. Ron let out a choked sob. Ginny, still fragile from the diary's feast, began to slide toward the floor. Harry didn't move. He didn't reach for his wand. The Dementor leaned in. It sensed the massive, concentrated soul matter within Harry's mind, the stone, the troll, the basilisk, and the dual riddle. To the creature, Harry Potter wasn't a boy. He was a banquet of 1,000 years. It tilted its head, the void beneath the hood expanding, preparing to kiss the light out of the sun. "You're in my way," Harry said. His voice didn't shake. It didn't possess the warmth of life. It was a frequency of pure, mathematical precision. Harry didn't cast a Patronus. He didn't think of a happy memory. He didn't have any that weren't manufactured for Dumbledore's benefit. Instead, he reached into the Serpent's Gallery of his mind. He took the killing gaze of the basilisk and the cold of the vault and he projected it. He didn't push the Dementor away. He invited it in. He opened a vacuum-sealed vent in the panopticon. He showed the Dementor the interior of his mind. He showed it the obsidian ruins, the diamond walls, and the prisoner who had died 1,000 times. He showed the creature a level of despair so absolute, so ancient, that the Dementor, a creature of pure misery, found itself outmatched. The Dementor recoiled. It let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but a hiss of escaping gas. It didn't just leave the compartment, it fled down the corridor, its rags fluttering in a panic that no one in the wizarding world had ever seen. "Harry," Ron gasped, his teeth chattering. What did you do? Where's the light? Where's the stag?" "I don't have a stag, Ron," Harry said, standing up. "I have a map, and the map says we're late." The arrival at the castle was a grim affair. The Dementors were stationed at every gate, their presence a suffocating weight that made the students weep in their sleep. But for Harry, the Dementors were a laboratory. He spent his nights on the astronomy tower, watching the shadows circle the battlements. He wasn't afraid, he was studying the physics of their consumption. You want to eat them? The riddle entity observed, its voice now a dark, melodic harmony. You want to add the void to the panopticon. You want to be the master of death before you've even learned to shave. I want to understand the limit of the lock, Harry thought. If a Dementor can eat a soul, and I am a container for souls, then the Dementor is the ultimate security system. Or the ultimate thief. The year grew darker with the news of Sirius Black, the supposed madman, the betrayer, the man who had broken out of Azkaban to finish the job Voldemort started. Harry listened to the rumors with a detached interest. He saw the way the teachers looked at him, the pity in Lupin's eyes, the simmering rage in Snape's, the calculated distance in Dumbledore's. They thought he was a target. They didn't realize he was the hunter. It happened during the first storm of November. The Quidditch pitch was a vortex of rain and mud. As Harry sat in the stands, he felt the shift in the air. 100 Dementors were drifting onto the field, drawn by the raw, concentrated emotion of the crowd. The players began to fall like flies. The light was being snuffed out. Dumbledore stood, his wand raised to cast a massive Patronus. But Harry was faster. He didn't want to save the game. He wanted to test the engine. Harry closed his eyes and sank into the deepest level of the panopticon. He reached past the riddle entity, past the stone's glow, down to the absolute center of his psyche. He didn't look for a happy memory. He looked for the concept of a cage. He projected a mental net. He didn't target the Dementors' bodies. He targeted their hunger. Feed, Harry commanded. The Dementors froze. 100 hooded terrors turned their heads toward the Slytherin stands. They felt a pull, not the pull of a soul to be eaten, but the pull of a vacuum that was starving. The crowd watched in horror as the Dementors began to spiral. They weren't attacking, they were being sucked toward a single point. A vortex of black smoke began to form around Harry Potter. He stood at the center of the storm, his arms outstretched, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, white-hot diamond light. He was siphoning them. He was pulling the void out of the Dementors and into the panopticon. He was building a new wing, the Chamber of Silence. Stop it, a voice thundered. A massive, silver phoenix erupted from Dumbledore's wand, slamming into the vortex. The shockwave of light shattered Harry's connection. The Dementors scattered, their forms flickering and weak, as they drifted back toward the gates of the school. Harry fell back into his seat, blood pouring from his ears and nose. His mind was screaming. The diamond panopticon was vibrating with a frequency that threatened to shatter his skull. Inside his head, the riddle entity was laughing, a horrific, multi-layered sound. You did it. You took the cold. We are the darkness now, Harry. Harry looked up. Dumbledore was standing at the edge of the teacher's stands. His wand still raised. The headmaster's face was no longer kind. It was the face of the man who had defeated Grindelwald. It was the face of a man who realized he had allowed a monster to grow in his own garden. To my office, Mr. Potter, Dumbledore said. The words weren't a request. They were a sentence. The walk to the headmaster's office was silent. The gargoyle moved aside without a word. Harry sat in the chair before the desk, his face a mask of ruined stone. What are you, Harry? Dumbledore asked. He wasn't looking at Harry, he was looking at the pensive, silver memories swirled like trapped ghosts. I'm a student, headmaster, Harry said. I was just defending myself. You were consuming them, Dumbledore said, finally looking up. His eyes were hard. I have seen many things in my life. I have seen men trade their souls for power. I have seen the dark arts used to tear the world apart. But I have never seen a child turn his own mind into a black hole. The Dementors are a threat, Harry said. I simply neutralized the threat. I took their cold and I put it in a box. Isn't that what you want? A world with fewer monsters. Not if the box is the monster. Dumbledore whispered. He leaned forward. I know what you did in the chamber, Harry. I found the diary. Or rather, I found the blank pages. And I know the stone was not destroyed. It was absorbed. The stone is safe, Harry said. Nothing is safe. Dumbledore roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The instruments on the shelves rattled. You are carrying a piece of the man who murdered your parents. You are carrying the legacy of the heir. And now, you are carrying the hunger of the void. You think you are the warden, but you are becoming the prison. And what will you do, Albus? Harry asked, his voice dropping into that chilling, tonal vacuum. Will you expel me? Will you send me back to the cupboard? You can't. You need me. Because the master is still out there. And you're too old to fight him again. Dumbledore closed his eyes. He looked ancient. He looked defeated. I should have seen it. I should have known that a boy who spent 10 years in the dark would learn to love the shadows. I don't love them, Harry said, standing up. I own them. As Harry walked toward the door, he stopped. By the way, Sirius Black didn't betray my parents. The rat did. Dumbledore froze. What? Check the Weasley boy's pet, Harry said, his hand on the door handle. He's been in the house for 12 years. He has a missing toe. And he smells of Peter Pettigrew. Harry walked out. He didn't care about justice for Sirius Black. He didn't care about the truth. He just wanted the board to be more complicated. He wanted the pieces to move so he could watch the patterns. That night, in the Slytherin dorms, Harry went into the Panopticon. The new wing was finished. The Chamber of Silence was a hall of absolute zero. In the center, 100 Dementor essences were trapped in crystalline jars. Their hunger serving as a perpetual motion machine for the prison's defenses. The Riddle entity stood before him. It was no longer just Tom Riddle. It was something else, a composite of every power Harry had stolen. It had the eyes of the basilisk, the strength of the troll, and the cloak of the Dementor. We are ready, the entity said. Ready for what? Harry asked. For the resurrection, the entity whispered. The master is gathering his strength. He is coming for a body. And when he arrives, we are going to show him what a real god looks like. Harry looked at his hands. They were no longer flesh. They were diamond. They were shadow. They were the lock. The boy who lived was a fairy tale. The boy who locked the door was a memory. The ward, N of Despair, was now the master of the castle. And the endgame was only a year away. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Crucible of the Dragon. The fourth year at Hogwarts didn't arrive with the usual scent of rain and pumpkin. It arrived with the smell of scorched earth and international tension. The Triwizard Tournament was a relic of a more brutal age, a spectacle of blood disguised as diplomacy. To the world, it was a competition. To Harry, it was a high-frequency lure designed to draw the master out of the shadows and into the kill zone. The Diamond Panopticon was now a sprawling, multidimensional fortress. The Chamber of Silence hummed with the stolen despair of the Dementors, feeding the wards until the air around Harry constantly shimmered with a refractive, predatory light. Inside, the Riddle entity, the composite soul, had become so dense it possessed its own gravity. Your name is in the cup, Harry, the entity whispered, its voice 1,000 overlapping shadows. The stuttering man is gone. But the new one, the one with the clockwork eye, he is watching. Everyone is watching. They want to see the boy who lived bleed. Let them watch, Harry thought, standing in the Great Hall as the goblet of fire spat out his name like a curse. The cup didn't choose me. The plot chose me. And I am the one who writes the ending. The outrage was predictable. The schools of Bow, Exbatons and Durmstrang looked at him with disdain. The Gryffindors looked at him with a betrayal they couldn't voice. Even Dumbledore's eyes were shadowed, his hands trembling as he stared at the fourth parchment. Harry didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He simply walked to the back room, his footsteps echoing like the ticking of a countdown. The first task was a demonstration of raw, elemental power. While the other champions, Diggory, Delacour, and Crumb, prepared spells of distraction and agility, Harry stood before the Hungarian Horntail with nothing but his hands in his pockets. The dragon was a mountain of obsidian scales and prehistoric fury. It let out a roar that shattered the glass in the spectators' stands, a plume of fire erupting from its throat that turned the sand of the arena into glass. Harry didn't move. He didn't draw his wand. He opened the Serpent's Gallery. He didn't just use the basilisk's gaze, he projected the concept of the apex predator. He stepped into the dragon's psychic space and showed it the Panopticon. He showed the beast the Dementors in their jars and the Soul King on his throne. The dragon stopped. Its fire died in its throat. It didn't just submissively lower its head. It began to whine, a low, guttural sound of primitive terror. The spectators went silent. There was no glory in this, no heroic struggle. It was a slaughter of the will. Harry walked up to the dragon, placed a hand on its snout, the scales smoking under his touch, and took the golden egg. He didn't even use a wand, the crowd whispered. But they weren't cheering. They were afraid. The months leading to the Yule Ball were a blur of cold politics. Harry moved through the social rituals like a shark through a kelp forest. He took Parvati Patil, not because he wanted to dance, but because she was a witness. He wanted everyone to see the cold up close. He wanted the master's spies to report that Harry Potter was no longer human. Then came the third task. The maze. The hedges were 20 feet tall, a living, breathing labyrinth designed to eat the weak. Harry entered the greenery and felt the shift immediately. The maze wasn't just a physical obstacle, it was a psychic amplifier. He's at the center, the entity hissed. The cup isn't a trophy. It's a portkey. The trap is sprung, Harry. The master has called, and the blood is ready to flow. Har. Y moved through the maze with a terrifying efficiency. He didn't fight the Sphinx, he stared it down until it fled. He didn't dodge the Acromantula, he crushed its mind with a pulse of the void. He reached the center at the same time as Cedric Diggory. We take it together, Cedric asked, his face flushed with a naive, noble heat. You should stay here, Cedric, Harry said. The world outside this maze is about to get very dark. I'm not a coward, Harry. No, Harry said, his eyes glowing with a faint, yellow rim. You're a casualty. Harry grabbed the handle of the Triwizard Cup. The world spun into a blur of blue light. The scent of the maze was replaced by the stench of rotted yew and damp earth. They were in a graveyard. Little Hangleton. Where are we? Cedric whispered, his wand out. The end of the prologue. Harry said. A shadow moved behind a tombstone. A short, balding man, Wormtail, approached, carrying a bundle of rags that pulsed with a sickening, cold life. Kill the spare, a high, cold voice commanded. Wormtail raised a wand. Avada Kedavra. The green light lit up the graveyard. Cedric Diggory fell without a sound, his eyes wide and empty. Harry didn't flinch, he didn't mourn. He watched the light fade, his mind already calculating the energy output of the killing curse. Now, the voice hissed. The ritual. Harry was bound to a headstone by magical cords, but he didn't struggle. He watched with a clinical detachment as Wormtail prepared the cauldron. Bone of the father, unknowingly given. Flesh of the servant, willingly sacrificed. Wormtail screamed as he hacked off his own hand. Then, the man approached Harry with a silver knife. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. The knife cut into Harry's arm. But as the blood hit the silver blade, something happened. The knife began to frost over. The blood wasn't red, it was a dark, shimmering violet, infused with the essence of the stone and the cold. Wormtail shivered as he dropped the blood into the cauldron. The potion turned a blinding, crystalline white. A thick vapor erupted, and from the steam, a man rose. He was tall, skeletally thin, and pale as a shroud. His eyes were red slits, his nose flat like a snake's. Lord Voldemort had returned. The Dark Lord breathed in the night air, his fingers twitching with the joy of new nerves. He looked at his hands, then at the cowering Wormtail, and finally, at Harry Potter. Harry Potter, Voldemort whispered, his voice a caress of death. 14 years. I have waited 14 years to look upon the boy who caused my fall. And look at you. You didn't even fight. You let the blood be taken. Have you finally realized that death is inevitable? Harry looked up from the headstone. The cords holding him were already brittle. The cold, eating through the magic. I didn't let you take the blood because I've given up, Tom, Harry said. His voice was steady, echoing in the silence of the graveyard. I let you take it because I wanted you to have a piece of the Panopticon. I wanted to see if your new body could handle the pressure. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed. He felt it then, a sudden, sharp chill in his marrow. His new heart skipped a beat. The blood of the enemy wasn't just life, it was a Trojan horse. What have you done? Voldemort roared. I've upgraded you, Harry said. He flexed his arms, and the magical cords shattered into dust. He stepped off the headstone, his presence expanding until the graveyard felt small. You wanted a body. I gave you one, but I built the foundation. You're not a Dark Lord anymore, Tom. You're a luxury suite in my basement. Voldemort let out a scream of pure, unadulterated rage and raised his wand. Avada Kedavra. The green light erupted, but Harry didn't dodge. He reached out with his bare hand and caught the curse. The graveyard went silent. The green light swirled around Harry's palm, being sucked into his skin, filtered through the diamond. Panopticon and stored in the Chamber of Silence. My turn, Harry said. He didn't use a wand. He opened the gates. The cold hit the graveyard like a nuclear blast. The grass turned to ash. The tombstones exploded into dust. Voldemort was thrown back, his new body screaming as the violet blood in his veins began to crystallize. Inside Harry's mind, the riddle entity roared in triumph. He is weak. The main soul is unstable. Take him now. No, Harry thought, watching Voldemort struggle to stand. Not yet. I want him to gather his followers. I want the world to see him rise, so they can watch me turn him into a doorstop. Voldemort pressed a finger to the dark mark on his arm. Shadows began to crack across the sky. The Death Eaters were coming. Harry looked at the sky, then back at the trembling Dark Lord. Go on, Tom, Harry said, his voice a chilling whisper that carried over the sound of arriving apparitions. Call your dogs. Tell them the king has returned. I'll be back for the keys at the end of the year. Harry grabbed Cedric's body in the cup. See you in school, Harry said. The blue light took him. He landed on the grass outside the maze, the cheers of the sea. Crowd turning to screams as they saw the body of Cedric Diggory. Dumbledore ran forward, but Harry stood up, his eyes as cold as the stars. He's back, Harry said, his voice flat. And he's exactly where I want him. The boy who lived was a legend. The boy who locked the door was a myth. The god of the Panopticon had just given the devil a body, and now, the real game was about to begin. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Governance of Ghosts. The summer following the graveyard was a suffocating silence. The wizarding world was a house in denial, its windows shuttered against the storm. Cornelius Fudge, the minister for magic, had chosen the comfort of a lie over the terror of the truth, branding Harry a delusional attention seeker. But at number 4, Privet Drive, Harry wasn't seeking attention. He was seeking structural integrity. The Diamond Panopticon was now a self-sustaining ecosystem. The Chamber of Silence had expanded, fueled by the residual energy of the killing curse Harry had caught in the graveyard. Inside, the Riddle entity, the composite soul, had reached a state of terrifying equilibrium. It no longer looked like Tom Riddle, it was a shifting, translucent figure of diamond and shadow. Its eyes the yellow of the basilisk, its voice the rattle of a Dementor. They are coming for you, Harry, the entity whispered. The old man's servants. They think you are a sheep to be herded. They don't realize you are the shepherd who has already sold the flock. The arrival of the Order of the Phoenix was a clumsy affair. Mad-Eye Moody, Tonks, and Lupin burst into the house with wands drawn. Their faces masks of grim determination. They expected a traumatized boy, they found a statue. Harry was sitting in the dark of his bedroom, his eyes glowing with a faint, rhythmic pulse. He didn't stand. He didn't pack. The Ministry has sent Dementors to Little Whinging, Harry, Lupin said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and pity. You're in danger. We're taking you to headquarters. The Dementors didn't come for me, Remus, Harry said, his voice a tonal vacuum that made Moody's magical eye spin wildly. They came to see if I had any more room in the jars. I did. He stood up, and the temperature in the room plummeted. The Order members instinctively stepped back. Let's go, Harry said. I've grown tired of the suburbs. Grimmauld Place was a tomb of ancient, rotted magic, the perfect secondary laboratory. As the Order of the Phoenix plotted their resistance, in the kitchen, Harry occupied the upper floors. He didn't attend their meetings. He didn't listen to their secrets. He was busy mapping the house's ancestral curses, absorbing the Black family's dark legacy into the Serpent's Gallery. Serious as a broken man, the entity observed as Harry watched his godfather drink in the shadows of the drawing room. He wants a godson. You are a god machine. He will break if he touches you. Everyone breaks, Tom, Harry thought. The trick is to be the one who collects the pieces. The 5th year began with the arrival of Dolores Umbridge, the Ministry's High Inquisitor. She was a woman of pink cardigans and curdled cruelty, a bureaucrat who thought she could regulate the soul. In the first defense against the dark arts lesson, she stood before the class, her voice a sickly sweet chirp. There will be no need for defensive spells in this classroom, children. You are safe. The Ministry. The Ministry is a collection of ghosts pretending they still have a pulse, Harry interrupted. The room went silent. Umbridge's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned into flint. Mr. Potter. 10 points from Slytherin. In detention. My office, at 5. The detention was a test of the cold. Umbridge handed Harry a black quill, the blood quill. You will write, I must not tell lies, Mr. Potter, as many times as it takes for the message to sink in. Harry took the quill. As he wrote, the words were carved into the back of his hand. Blood seeped onto the parchment. But Harry didn't flinch. He didn't feel the pain. Inside the Panopticon, he was laughing. He wasn't losing blood, He was planting a bug. The blood quill was a bridge. Every stroke of the pen connected Umbridge's life force to the Chamber of Silence. Harry wasn't being punished. He was siphoning the Ministry's authority, one drop of blood at a time. By the end of the hour, Umbridge looked pale, her breath hitching, while Harry's hand was already healed, the skin smooth as diamond. "Is there something wrong, Professor?" Harry asked, his eyes yellowing. "You look drained out," she shrieked, her hand trembling. As the year progressed, Harry formed the D.A., not Dumbledore's army, but the Diamond Assembly. He didn't teach them Expelliarmus. He taught them the cold. He taught the students how to wall off their minds, how to turn their fear into a battery. He was building an army of mini-wardens, a network of anchors that would hold the castle when the Master finally struck. The visions began in December. Voldemort was seeking the prophecy, the record of their shared destiny. "He is obsessed with the words," the entity sneered. "He thinks the future is written in glass. He doesn't realize the glass is in our hand. He wants a distraction," Harry thought. "He wants to draw the Order away from the Ministry so he can take the sphere. Let's give him a show." The battle at the Department of Mysteries was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The Order and the Death Eaters clashed in the Hall of Prophecies, spells shattering the glass SP. Here's until the air was thick with the dust of dead futures. Harry stood in the center of the Room of Death, the veil fluttering behind him. He held the prophecy, the small, glowing orb. "Give it to me, Potter," Lucius Malfoy hissed. His mask cracked. "Give it to me and perhaps the Dark Lord will be merciful." "Mercy is a lack of imagination, Lucius," Harry said. He didn't hand it over. He didn't smash it. He drank it. He crushed the orb in his hand and inhaled the silver smoke. The prophecy, the words of Trelawney, were integrated into the Panopticon's database. "And either must die at T. He hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." The logic is flawed, Harry thought. It assumes we are two separate entities. It doesn't account for the fact that I am the container for both. Suddenly, the air split. Voldemort appeared, his red eyes burning with a murderous light. "You have played your last game, Harry. The stone, the blood, the prophecy, none of it will save you." "I don't need saving, Tom," Harry said. Bellatrix Lestrange lunged forward, a killing curse on her lips, but Harry didn't move. He reached out and grabbed the air. The void erupted. He Dementor essences in the Chamber of Silence roared. A wave of absolute despair hit the room, freezing the Death Eaters in their tracks. Bellatrix fell to her knees, her eyes rolling back as she awed the infinite nothingness of Harry's mind. Voldemort roared and unleashed a torrent of fire, the Fiendfire. The flames took the shape of serpents and chimeras, roaring toward Harry. Harry raised his hand. Silence. The fire didn't just go out, it turned to ice. The cold consumed the magical heat, turning the hellfire into frozen statues of soot. Voldemort staggered. He felt the violet blood in his heart begin to lag. The connection Harry had forged in the graveyard was a leash, and the warden was finally pulling. "You are a body I built, Tom," Harry said, stepping toward the Dark Lord. "You are a ghost I allowed to have skin. Did you really think you could rebel against your landlord?" Dumbledore arrived then, a burst of golden light that pushed back the shadows. He looked at the scene, the frozen Death Eaters, the trembling Voldemort, and Harry, who stood in the center of the carnage like a god of the abyss. "Harry, stop," Dumbledore pleaded. "This is not the way. The way is closed, Albus," Harry said. He turned his gaze to Voldemort. He didn't cast a spell. He used the cold to reach into Voldemort's new body and squeeze the link. Voldemort let out a horrific, high-pitched scream. His skin began to crack, the violet light of the stone's residue leaking from his pores. He didn't stay to fight. He vanished in a swirl of black smoke, his retreat a frantic, panicked flight. The Ministry officials, led by Fudge, arrived just in time to see the Dark Lord's silhouette vanish. The denial was over. The war was official. But as the Order members began to tend to the wounded, Harry stood by the archway of the veil. He looked at Dumbledore. "The prophecy is gone," Harry said. "And so is your influence. The Ministry will look to you to save them, but they'll be looking at a man who is too afraid to do what's necessary." "And what is necessary, Harry?" Dumbledore asked, his voice broken. "Total containment," Harry said. He walked past the headmaster, his yes glowing with the combined light of the stone, the soul, and the void. The boy who lived was a history book. The boy who locked the door was a memory. The warden of the Diamond Panopticon was now the shadow over Britain. And the final year was no longer a fight for survival, it was a harvest. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15. The Architect of the Absolute. The 6th year at Hogwarts was a funeral for the world that was. The sky over the Highlands was a permanent bruise, the sun a pale, distant memory. The Diamond Panopticon had reached its zenith, it was no longer a structure within Harry's mind, but a lens through which he viewed the entire material plane. Inside, the Riddle entity sat on a throne of crystalline silence. It was no longer a prisoner, it was the operating system. Every RCRUX Voldemort had ever made was a resonant frequency, a beacon calling out to the Master Soul, held within Harry's diamond-lit ribs. He is hiding them in the places of his pride, the entity whispered, its voice a symphony of shadows. The cave of the sea, the shack of the dead, the cup of the thief. He thinks they are anchors. He doesn't realize they are breadcrumbs. He's desperate, Tom, Harry thought. Walking the corridors of the castle. The students no longer whispered. They simply stopped breathing until he passed. He feels the siphon. He knows his new body is a battery I'm draining. The year was defined by the lessons with Dumbledore. The headmaster was a dying man, the curse from the gaunt ring blackening his hand like a spreading rot. He tried to show Harry the memories of Tom Riddle's past, hoping to find a spark of humanity or a weakness in the Dark Lord's ego. Harry watched the memories with a clinical boredom. You were looking for the why, Albus, Harry sighed. During a late-night session in the tower. The why is irrelevant. A storm doesn't have a motive. A vacuum doesn't have a philosophy. Tom Riddle isn't a man, he's a leak in the universe. And I'm the plug. You have no love in you. Harry, Dumbledore whispered, his blue eyes watery and dim. That was the power the prophecy spoke of. The power the Dark Lord knows not. But you have traded love for a lock. Love is a variable I can't control, Harry said, standing by the window. A lock is a certainty. I'd rather be certain than sentimental. The reclamation began in earnest. Harry didn't wait for Dumbledore to find the locations. He used the cold. He projected his consciousness across the British Isles, sensing the jagged, discordant hum of the Horcruxes. He found the locket in the cave. He didn't drink the potion of despair, he absorbed it. The liquid, designed to break a man's mind, was nothing compared to the chamber of silence already within him. He reached into the basin and pulled out the gold, the fragment inside screaming as it was instantly sucked into the Panopticon. He found the cup in Gringotts. He didn't break into the vault, he simply walked through the stone. His body vibrating at the frequency of the void. The goblins found him standing in the center of the pile of gold, holding the Hufflepuff treasure as the soul matter inside turned to gray dust. By the time the final confrontation on the astronomy tower arrived, Harry was a walking singularity. Snape was there, his face a mask of absolute agony. He had been ordered by Dumbledore to kill the headmaster, to save the old man from the humiliation of the curse and to secure his position within the Death Eaters. Severus, please, Dumbledore whispered. Harry stood in the shadows, watching. He saw the green light erupt from Snape's wand. He saw the headmaster fall, the body tumbling over the battlements like a broken bird. He didn't stop it, he needed the old world to die so the new architecture could be finalized. As the Death Eaters fled and the school erupted in screams, Harry stood over the spot where Dumbledore had fallen. He reached out his hand and caught the Elder Wand as it spun through the air. The wood hummed. It recognized a master, but not a hero. It recognized a warden. The final piece, the entity roared. The Wand of Destiny, the Stone of Resurrection, the Cloak of Invisibility. The Hallows are the blueprints for the Great Cage, Harry. We aren't going to hide from death, Tom, Harry said, looking at the wand. We're going to give it a permanent address. The 7th year never truly happened at Hogwarts. The ministry fell in a single night. Voldemort assumed the throne, his reign a desperate, frantic attempt to rebuild his power while the cold continued to eat him from the inside out. Harry moved through the country like a winter that wouldn't end. He found the diadem in the room of requirement. He found the snake, Nagini, and crushed her life out with a thought, adding her primitive hunger to the serpent's gallery. Finally, there was only one Horcrux left. The one behind the scar. The Battle of Hogwarts was a slaughter. The Death Eaters fought the Order. But Harry was the one who cleared the board. He walked through the front gates, and every Dementor in the sky simply vanished. They didn't flee, they were recalled to the Chamber of Silence. The forest was silent. Voldemort stood in a clearing, surrounded by his remaining followers. He looked like a man made of glass, his skin glowing with a sickly, violet light, his breath a ragged gasp. "You have nothing left, Tom," Harry said, stepping into the light of the clearing. "No cups, no lockets, no snakes. You are a ghost with nowhere to go. I have you," Voldemort shrieked. "As long as you live, I live. You are the final anchor." "I'm not an anchor," Harry said. "I'm the drain." Harry dropped his wand. He stood with his arms open, his eyes turning into twin suns of diamond light. "Kill me," Harry said. "See what happens when the cage is opened from the inside." Voldemort roared and unleashed the final killing curse. The green light hit Harry square in the chest. The world exploded into white. Harry found himself in a version of King's Cross Station. It was clean, silent, and infinite. Under a bench, a small, shriveled creature whimpered, the final pathetic piece of Voldemort's original soul. Dumbledore was there, standing on the platform. "Harry, you have a choice. You can go on. You can be free of the burden. You can finally let the cold go." Harry looked at the old man. Then he looked at the shriveled thing under the bench. "And leave the world to the chaos of the light?" Harry asked. "No. I spent 10 years in a cupboard, Albus. I learned that the only way to be safe is to own the house." Harry didn't board a train. He reached down and picked up the shriveled piece of Voldemort. He didn't comfort it, he compressed it. He turned the final fragment into a small, black diamond and swallowed it. The white world shattered. Harry stood up in the forest. The Death Eaters were screaming. Voldemort was on the ground, his body turning to ash as the final link was reclaimed. The Dark Lord didn't die, he was withdrawn. Every piece of Tom Riddle, every drop of his magic, every memory of his existence was now held within the Diamond Panopticon. The Warden was complete. Harry stood over the remains of the war. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He looked at the survivors, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and they looked back with a terror that surpassed anything they had felt for Voldemort. "The war is over," Harry said. His voice was a global broadcast, echoing in every ear in Britain. "The Master is contained. The shadows are regulated. From this day forward, there will be no more Dark Lords. Because there is no more room in the dark." He looked up at the sky. The clouds parted, but the sun didn't return. Instead, the sky turned into a vast, shimmering diamond, a reflection of the Panopticon. The boy who lived was a myth. The boy who locked the door was a legend. The architect of the Absolute was now the king of the world. And for the first time in his life, the cupboard was finally big enough. End of The Alchemist's Grief.